Imagine for a moment you're digging maybe in your own backyard or deep in a forgotten cave, and your shovel strikes something solid, something unmistakably crafted by human hands. But as you brush away the dirt, you realize this object doesn't belong. It's too advanced, too out of place, as if it slipped through a crack in time itself. What would you think? What would you feel? That thrill of the unknown, that humbling sense that history might be far stranger and more magnificent than we've been taught, is exactly what we're diving into today. Throughout human history, we've told ourselves a story of gradual progress, of civilizations rising and falling in something like a straight line. But what if that story is incomplete? What if there were chapters lost, technologies forgotten, cultures so advanced that all they left behind were whispers in the form of objects that simply don't fit? In this video, we're going to explore 33 ancient tools and artifacts discovered in contexts that defy explanation, objects that challenge not only timelines, but the very foundation of what we believe is possible. From intricate devices that resemble modern machinery to everyday items found in rock layers millions of years old, these aren't just curiosities, they're provocations. They ask us to reconsider everything from the origins of human ingenuity to the possibility of lost worlds. So join me on a journey into the heart of historical mystery. We'll venture across continents and epochs, examining each enigmatic discovery with a careful balance of wonder and skepticism. You'll hear the debates, explore the theories, and maybe even find yourself questioning what you thought you knew about our past. This isn't just a list of oddities, it's an invitation to look at history not as a closed book, but as an unfolding puzzle, one that continues to surprise, challenge, and inspire us. Are you ready to explore what shouldn't exist but does, but what exactly makes an artifact out of place? It's not merely about age or complexity in isolation. An OOP art, or out-of-place artifact, is something that fundamentally clashes with our established historical narrative. Imagine finding a sophisticated mechanical device in a layer of earth dating back thousands of years before such engineering was thought possible. Or picture a common tool from the 19th century mysteriously encased inside a million-year-old rock formation. These aren't just old objects, they are chronological paradoxes, physical anomalies that seem to whisper of lost chapters in human history. The term itself captures that sense of bewildering dislocation, an object that feels like it was dropped into the wrong time period, like a character from a science fiction story. The fascination with these items isn't a new phenomenon. For centuries, curious minds have stumbled upon objects that defied easy explanation, sparking debates that rage to this day. On one side, you have mainstream archaeologists and scientists who often approach these finds with a healthy dose of skepticism. They meticulously search for more conventional explanations. Could it be a hoax, perhaps planted to gain fame or fortune? Might it be a simple case of misidentification, where a natural geological formation is mistaken for a crafted tool? Or could the dating methods be off, or the object itself have migrated from a different, more recent layer of soil due to natural processes like erosion or animal activity? Their rigorous scrutiny is essential, acting as a necessary filter to separate genuine historical mysteries from modern mistakes or deliberate deceptions. On the other side of the debate are alternative theorists and independent researchers. They look at the same evidence and see not simple errors but profound clues. They propose that these objects could be evidence of advanced prehistoric civilizations whose achievements were wiped out by some cataclysm, leaving only fragments behind. Others take the idea even further, speculating about possible extraterrestrial visitors who may have influenced early human development. While these ideas might seem far-fetched to some, they stem from a genuine desire to explain the seemingly inexplicable and to challenge what we think we know. This tension between established science and alternative possibility is what gives the study of OOP arts its compelling dynamism. It's a field that demands both open-minded imagination and unwavering critical thinking. You have to be willing to ask, what if, while also demanding, show me the evidence. This careful balance is crucial because the implications are staggering. If even one of these artifacts is genuinely authentic and not a hoax or a mistake, it forces us to reconsider the entire timeline of human innovation and our place in history. It suggests that progress isn't always a straight, upward line, that knowledge can be lost, that entire cultures can vanish with barely a trace, and that our ancestors might have been far more ingenious than we've ever given them credit for. Understanding this ongoing debate is the key to appreciating the incredible stories behind the 33 tools we are about to explore. Each one is a piece of a vast, intricate puzzle, and as we examine them, we'll be walking that fine line between skepticism and wonder, always searching for the truth hidden within the mystery. Our journey into the realm of the inexplicable begins not in some hidden cave or remote desert, but at the bottom of the sea. In the year 1901, sponge divers exploring an ancient Roman shipwreck near the island of Antikythera made a discovery that would baffle historians for over a century. Amidst the statues and ceramics, they recovered a lump of corroded bronze and wood that seemed unremarkable at first. It was only years later, when archaeologists began to carefully examine it, that they realized they were looking at the fragments of an impossibly intricate machine. This is the Antikythera Mechanism, a device so advanced that it has been called the world's first analog computer. Dating back to around 100 BCE, this complex clockwork instrument was housed in a wooden case and operated by a hand crank. Inside, a system of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears worked in concert to model the movements of the heavens. It wasn't just a simple calendar. It was a sophisticated mechanical computer that could predict the positions of the sun, the moon, and likely the 5 known planets. It could forecast lunar and solar eclipses, and it even modeled the irregular orbit of the moon with stunning accuracy using a clever pin and slot mechanism that accounted for its variable speed. This wasn't just a tool for farmers, it was a precision instrument of science and philosophy, a working model of the universe as the ancient Greeks understood it. The sheer sophistication of the mechanism is what places it so firmly in the category of an out-of-place artifact. Nothing remotely close to its complexity appears in the historical record for over 1,000 years. We have no surviving texts from antiquity that describe its creation or its use. The level of miniaturization and mechanical engineering required to build such a device with hand tools is staggering. It implies a whole lost school of technology, a tradition of precision gear making that simply vanished from history. How could such groundbreaking knowledge appear fully formed and then disappear without a trace for more than a millennium? This profound mystery has, of course, sparked countless theories. Some suggest it might be a rare survivor from a more advanced civilization that was lost, perhaps inspired by the legendary knowledge of Atlantis. Others propose it could be a unique masterpiece from a genius inventor like Archimedes, whose lost writings hint at mechanical planetariums. The most compelling and widely accepted theory is that it was a product of the brilliant scientific community in Rhodes, a center for astronomy and technology at the time. But even this doesn't fully explain the gap. Why was this technology not replicated, improved upon, and spread across the world? Its loss feels like a historical wrong turn, a glimpse of a path not taken. The Antikythera Mechanism forces us to confront a humbling possibility that our timeline of technological progress might be wrong. It suggests that peak achievements in certain fields can be isolated, forgotten, and then independently reinvented centuries later. This one device, salvaged from the depths, challenges the very notion of linear advancement and opens a window into a forgotten world of ancient scientific ingenuity that we are only just beginning to appreciate. While the Antikythera Mechanism hints at a lost pinnacle of mechanical genius, our next artifact suggests something even more profound, a flicker of electrical light in the ancient world. Discovered in 1936 just outside Baghdad, this peculiar object doesn't look like much at first glance. It's a simple 6-inch tall clay jar, but its contents are what have fueled decades of debate. Inside, archaeologists found a copper cylinder carefully soldered with a 60-40 lead tin alloy, and nestled within that cylinder was an iron rod. The jar itself showed signs of being sealed with an asphalt plug, which would have held the metal components in place while insulating them from each other. This unique combination of materials, an acidic electrolyte like vinegar or wine between the two dissimilar metals, is the exact recipe for a simple electrochemical cell. In other words, it looks unmistakably like a primitive battery, dating to the Parthian or Sassanid period, somewhere between 250 BCE and 250 CE. This object predates the modern rediscovery of galvanic principles by Alessandro Volta in the early 1800s by well over a millennium. The implications of this are nothing short of revolutionary. If this was indeed its purpose, it means a culture from antiquity not only stumbled upon the basic principles of electricity, but potentially found a practical application for it. The most compelling theory proposed by its supporters is electroplating, the process of using an electric current to bond a thin layer of a precious metal, like gold, onto the surface of a less valuable object. This would explain the existence of exquisite, microscopically thin gold layering found on some artifacts from the region that has always been difficult to account for with traditional chemical gilding methods. Other speculative uses range from a medical device for therapeutic shocks, a practice documented in other ancient cultures for pain relief, to something more ceremonial, perhaps creating a tingling sensation in a religious context to signify a divine touch. Of course, the mainstream archaeological view offers more conventional explanations. Skeptics point out that similar jars have been found in the region with papyrus or parchment scrolls tucked inside the copper cylinders, suggesting they were simply secure storage containers. The asphalt seal, in this case, would have been a perfect way to keep out moisture and protect important documents. The iron rod could have been a misplaced stylus or another unrelated item that found its way into the jar long after it was created. They argue that if these were truly widespread batteries, we would have found many more of them, or perhaps even tools or objects that were clearly designed to be used with them. Yet, the experimental evidence is hard to ignore. Numerous researchers and engineers have built exact replicas of the Baghdad Battery. When filled with an electrolyte like grape juice, a substance readily available in the ancient world, these replicas consistently produce a measurable voltage, typically between 0.8 and 2 volts. While it's not enough power to light a modern bulb, it is certainly sufficient for electroplating small objects. A series of these jars connected together could have created a much more significant charge. This tangible proof forces us to confront a tantalizing what if. What if this knowledge wasn't lost? What if the fall of empires and the dark ages that followed snuffed out this spark of electrical understanding before it could ever catch flame? The Baghdad Battery stands as a quiet, enigmatic monument not to what ancient people definitely achieved, but to a potential they might have possessed, a road not taken in the long story of human innovation. Moving from the ancient workshop to a modern-day treasure hunt, our next mystery takes us to the mountains of California in the early 1960s. Three rockhounds were searching for geodes, those fascinating, plain-looking stones that hide beautiful crystal interiors near the town of Olancha. What they found that day, however, was far more bizarre than any crystal. When they cracked open what they thought was a common geode, they discovered something utterly incongruous, a manufactured object nestled inside. It wasn't a fossil or a mineral formation. It was a spark plug encased in a hard, shell-like layer of hardened clay, pebbles, and what appeared to be fossilized shells. The initial excitement was palpable. Here was an object from the industrial age seemingly trapped inside a natural formation that, by all geological logic, should have taken hundreds of thousands of years to form. The find was dubbed the Coso Artifact, named for the nearby Coso Mountains. The rockhounds took their discovery to a geologist who reportedly estimated the age of the encasing nodule to be an astonishing 500,000 years old. The implications were staggering. If this dating was accurate, it meant that a spark plug, a technology from the late 19th century, existed 500,000 years before humans were supposed to have evolved. The story quickly captured the public imagination, fueling wild speculation. Was it proof of a time traveler who left their tools behind? Evidence of a highly advanced prehistoric civilization, like Atlantis or Mu, that had achieved an industrial revolution? Or perhaps even a remnant from ancient extraterrestrial visitors? The mystery deepened the more experts looked at it. X-ray analysis revealed that the object inside wasn't just a simple spark plug. It seemed to have a metal core surrounded by a ceramic or porcelain collar, with a hexagonal nut at one end, a design consistent with early 20th century champion spark plugs. But how did it get inside a rock? Proponents of its anomalous nature argued that the hard, concretion layer around it couldn't have formed in just a few decades. They pointed to the apparent fossilization, suggesting it had to be ancient. This artifact became a perfect symbol of the OOP art dilemma, a clearly modern object in a seemingly ancient context, creating a paradox that defied easy explanation. The case of the Coso Artifact, however, is also a masterclass in the importance of rigorous investigation and the dangers of jumping to extraordinary conclusions. As more skeptical researchers began to pick apart the story, a more plausible, albeit less sensational, narrative emerged. The key was correctly identifying the geode. True geodes form in volcanic rock, creating hollow cavities lined with crystals. The object found by the rockhounds was not a geode but a concretion, a hard, compact mass of mineral matter that forms around a nucleus when mineral-rich water deposits layers over time. Concretions can form much faster than geodes, especially in the right conditions. A definitive break in the case came from none other than the spark plug collecting community. A journalist investigating the story in the late 1990s brought clear photographs of the object to experts and collectors. They identified it almost instantly. The unique combination of materials and the specific style of the hexagonal nut matched spark plugs manufactured by Champion in the 1920s. It was almost certainly a plug from a Model T or Model A Ford engine, but the final nail in the coffin of the ancient civilization theory was an analysis of the concretion itself. The hard shell wasn't 500,000 years old. It was a mixture of iron and manganese oxides, minerals that can accumulate relatively quickly around a metal object left in damp, mineral-laden soil. The fossilized shells were likely just bits of contemporary freshwater snail shells that had become embedded in the growing concretion. The most likely explanation is that the spark plug was dropped or discarded on a dirt road near a lake or stream sometime in the 1920s or 30s. Over the ensuing decades, mineral-rich water percolated around it, slowly building up a hard, rock-like shell that, to an untrained eye, looked immensely ancient. The true legacy of the Coso Artifact isn't about proving the existence of ancient advanced societies. Instead, it serves as a crucial cautionary tale for anyone fascinated by historical mysteries. It highlights the immense challenges of dating and authenticating unusual finds, especially when they rely on visual inspection rather than rigorous scientific testing. It demonstrates how easily our desire for mystery can lead us to misinterpret natural processes, seeing what we want to see rather than what is actually there. Most importantly, it reminds us that a balance must be struck between open-minded curiosity and disciplined critical thinking. The world is full of genuine historical puzzles, but for every true anomaly, there are countless cases like the Coso Artifact ordinary objects that tell an extraordinary story only because we've misread the pages of the book they were found in. Leaving behind the arid landscapes of California, our journey into the anomalous takes us next to the banks of the Red Creek in Texas, a site that would become the center of one of the most visually striking and fiercely debated out-of-place artifacts ever discovered. In 1936, a couple hiking near the town of London, Texas, made a find that seems to defy all logic. As they walked along the creek bed, they noticed a curious piece of rock with what appeared to be a piece of wood protruding from it. Taking it home, they eventually cracked the rock open to reveal something astonishing nestled inside: a perfectly formed iron hammer with a well-preserved wooden handle. The hammer itself looked like it could have been dropped by a 19th-century carpenter, yet it was completely encased in a solid, ancient limestone nodule. The rock surrounding it was quickly identified as coming from the Cretaceous period, dating it to over 100 million years ago, a time when dinosaurs like Tyrannosaurus rex roamed the earth and mammals were tiny, insignificant creatures. The immediate and obvious question is one that strikes at the very heart of our understanding of history. How could a clearly human-made, modern-looking tool become trapped inside rock that formed millions of years before humans even evolved? The London hammer, as it came to be known, presents a paradox that is both simple and profoundly unsettling. The hammerhead is made of iron that is unusually pure, with metallurgical analysis showing very low levels of impurities like sulfur or carbon, a composition that suggests a more advanced smelting process than one might expect for an ancient artifact. Even more baffling is the condition of the wooden handle. Wood typically decomposes over centuries, yet this handle was not only intact but had undergone a process of lignification, where the cellulose had been replaced by minerals, effectively turning it to stone while preserving its original structure. For those who believe the hammer is genuinely ancient, this preservation is a key piece of evidence, suggesting it was encased and protected by the rock for an immense span of time. The implication, if we take this at face value, is nothing short of revolutionary. It would mean that a species capable of advanced metallurgy and tool-making existed in North America over 100 million years ago, a claim that would completely upend the entire timeline of human evolution, paleontology, and geology as we know it. Unsurprisingly, mainstream science offers a far more conventional, yet still fascinating, explanation. Geologists point to a common natural phenomenon known as concretion. Concretions form when mineral cement precipitates and hardens around a nucleus, often an organic object like a shell, a bone, or, in this case, perhaps a lost hammer. The specific chemistry of the water in that creek bed could have allowed minerals to accumulate around the hammer relatively quickly, forming a hard, rock-like shell in a matter of decades or centuries, not millennia. This process can create a perfect mold of the object, making it appear as if it was magically sealed inside ancient stone. Skeptics argue that the Cretaceous dating is a red herring. The hammer wasn't found embedded in a solid bedrock cliff face from that era. It was found loose in a creek bed, a place where rocks of all different ages, eroded from their original locations, can commingle. The concretion itself, they posit, could be made from much more recent minerals that simply hardened around a perfectly ordinary hammer from the 1800s. The debate over the London hammer perfectly encapsulates the eternal struggle between extraordinary claims and extraordinary evidence. It forces us to confront the limitations of our own methods. Can we always trust the dating of the rock surrounding an object, especially when it's been moved by water and weather? How do we distinguish between a genuine artifact from deep time and a more recent object that nature has expertly disguised? The hammer's current home, the Creation Evidence Museum, champions it as proof of a young Earth or a lost creation, while the scientific establishment largely dismisses it as a geological curiosity. Regardless of where the truth ultimately lies, the London hammer serves a crucial purpose. It is a permanent physical question mark. It challenges us not to blindly accept, but to diligently investigate. It reminds us that the Earth has a long and complex history, and sometimes it plays tricks on us, burying the ordinary in layers of mystery that can make it look, for a moment, like the impossible. Deep in the sands of a quarry on the banks of the Mureș River in Romania, construction workers in 1974 made a discovery that would become one of Europe's most perplexing archaeological puzzles. Buried approximately 30 feet down, nestled amongst the bones of a long-extinct mastodon, they found 3 mysterious objects. 2 were clearly fossilized bones, but the third was something entirely different. A wedge-shaped piece of metal, heavy for its size and covered in a thick, black patina. It didn't look like any known ancient tool. Initially, the workers thought little of it, but its true mystery would only be revealed under scientific scrutiny. This is the Aiud Wedge, an object that shouldn't exist, found in a place where it simply doesn't belong. The initial analysis focused on the 2 mastodon bones, which were quickly dated to be around 20,000 years old, placing them firmly in the Pleistocene epoch. This alone was a significant find, but when researchers turned their attention to the strange metal wedge, the story took a dramatic and baffling turn. To determine its composition, the object was subjected to spectrographic analysis by 2 separate laboratories, one in Lausanne, Switzerland, and another in Romania. The results were identical and astonishing. The wedge was composed of an alloy primarily made of aluminum, approximately 90%, with trace amounts of 11 other elements including copper, zinc, silicon, and cadmium. For historians of technology, this result was a chronological impossibility. While aluminum is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, it is never found in its pure metallic form in nature. It is always bound up in ores, primarily bauxite. Isolating pure aluminum requires a complex industrial process of electrolysis that wasn't invented until 1886. The idea of a refined aluminum object dating back 20,000 years is, by all conventional accounts, an utter impossibility. This stark contradiction between the object's composition and its proposed age has, predictably, launched a universe of theories. The most tantalizing, and certainly the most popular among alternative history enthusiasts, is that the wedge is a fragment of advanced ancient machinery. Could it be a piece of a much larger, sophisticated device from a lost civilization, one that possessed knowledge of metallurgy and engineering that rivaled or even surpassed our own until very recently? Others, looking at its unique shape and composition, have proposed an even more radical idea, that it is a piece of extraterrestrial technology, perhaps a landing leg or a component from a spacecraft that crashed on Earth millennia ago. The wedge's aerodynamic, streamlined shape does lend some superficial credence to this idea, making it look less like a hand tool and more like a part designed for a specific mechanical function. The scientific and archaeological establishment, however, approaches the Aiud Wedge with profound skepticism. Their primary counter-argument is one of context and contamination. The object was found in a quarry, a site of intense modern industrial activity using heavy machinery. Excavators and bulldozers were constantly churning up the earth. The most plausible explanation from this perspective is that the wedge is a modern piece of industrial equipment that simply fell into the pit or was buried during operations, later to be unearthed alongside the ancient bones by sheer coincidence. The 20,000-year date, they argue, applies only to the mastodon bones, not to the metal object found near them. The two became associated by chance, not by origin. Critics also point to the lack of any other similar finds from the period. If an advanced culture was producing aluminum alloys 20,000 years ago, where is the rest of their technology? Where are the mines, the smelters, the other tools? Its solitary nature makes it look more like an anomaly than evidence of a forgotten chapter. Despite these reasonable doubts, the Aiud Wedge continues to captivate because it represents a perfect storm of mystery, a scientifically verified composition that defies history, found in an ancient context with no clear or universally accepted explanation. It forces us to confront the gaps in our knowledge and the limitations of our methods. Archaeology relies on context to tell a story, but what happens when a single piece of evidence seems to rewrite the entire narrative? Whether a misplaced piece of a 20th century excavator or a genuine relic of a lost world, the Aiud Wedge stands as a powerful symbol. It reminds us that the ground beneath our feet may still hold secrets that challenge our deepest assumptions about the journey of human innovation, whispering that our past might be far stranger and more wonderful than our history books dare to admit. Now let's cross the continent to the heart of New England, where another artifact emerged from the stone that seemed to laugh in the face of established timelines. In 1852, in the town of Dorchester, Massachusetts, workmen were blasting rock to prepare for new construction. As the dust settled from a particularly large explosion, they made a discovery that would baffle the local community and eventually the world. Among the shattered fragments of solid, ancient pudding stone, a tough conglomerate rock, they found the remains of a beautifully crafted, bell-shaped vessel. It was not simply lying on the ground. It had been completely embedded within the rock itself, torn in two by the force of the blast. This was the Dorchester Pot, an object of exquisite and anachronistic beauty. The vase itself, once reconstructed, stood about 4.5 inches high and 6.5 inches wide at its base. It was made of a peculiar zinc-rich metal and inlaid with an intricate design of pure silver, depicting a delicate vine with 6 flowers or clusters. The craftsmanship was undeniably sophisticated, showcasing a level of artistry and metallurgical skill that was completely out of sync with its geological context. The rock layer from which it was excavated was identified as the Roxbury conglomerate, a formation dating back to the Precambrian era, over 600 million years ago. This is a period so remote that life on Earth was, by all scientific consensus, confined to simple, single-celled organisms in the oceans. the idea of a sentient being, let alone a master metalsmith, crafting a decorative vase at this time is, of course, a scientific impossibility of the highest order. The immediate and obvious question is how such an object could possibly end up sealed inside million-year-old stone. For those who take the discovery at face value, the implications are staggering. It would suggest that an advanced, artistic civilization existed in North America in a deep, unimaginable antiquity, a civilization that possessed not only the knowledge of metalworking but also a refined aesthetic sense. This would completely obliterate our understanding of human evolution and the development of technology, pushing the dawn of complex society back into a geological dark age. It's a narrative that appeals to the romantic idea of lost worlds and forgotten golden ages, a tantalizing glimpse of a history we never knew. Mainstream science, however, offers a far more prosaic, yet still fascinating explanation. The most widely accepted theory is that the Dorchester Pot is a classic example of an object falling into what is known as a fissure fill. The Roxbury conglomerate, while ancient, is not a seamless, unbroken monolith. Over millennia, it can develop deep cracks and fissures due to seismic activity, frost wedging, or erosion. These fissures can then be filled in with more recent soil, debris, and even human-made objects from a much later period. Over time, this fill material can harden and cement together, creating a new rock matrix that encases the object, making it appear as if it was part of the original, ancient formation. From this perspective, the pot is likely a much more recent artifact, perhaps a Victorian-era decorative piece, a candlestick holder, or even an incense burner from the 19th century that was lost or discarded. It then tumbled into a narrow fissure in the ground, where mineral-rich water percolated around it, eventually cementing it into a new, hard concretion that was mistaken for the original Precambrian bedrock by the startled workmen. This explanation, while less thrilling, is geologically sound. It accounts for the object's modern appearance and the lack of any other similar finds from that impossibly remote era. Yet, the story of the Dorchester Pot endures because it perfectly illustrates the powerful clash between a single, strange discovery and the overwhelming weight of established evidence. It forces us to ask a critical question: do we allow one anomalous find to overthrow entire scientific paradigms, or do we seek a more conservative explanation that fits within our current understanding, even if it feels less exciting? The pot itself has been lost to history, leaving behind only contemporary descriptions and sketches, which makes definitive analysis impossible. This absence only adds to its mystique, turning it into a ghost of a mystery, a question that can never be fully answered. It stands as a permanent reminder that the Earth is a great keeper of secrets, and sometimes it offers up puzzles not to give us answers, but to test our willingness to question, to investigate, and to wonder. From the contested quarries of New England, we now travel to the even more ancient and mysterious landscape of South Africa, where miners have been unearthing tiny, enigmatic objects for decades. These are the Klerksdorp Spheres, and they are, without a doubt, some of the most perplexing and hotly debated artifacts in the world of ancient mysteries. Found in pyrophyllite deposits near the town of Ottostel, these spheres are extracted from a rock layer known as the Precambrian Transvaal supergroup, which has been dated to a staggering 2.8 billion years old. To put that almost incomprehensible age into perspective, this was a time when Earth was a truly alien world. The atmosphere was toxic to modern life, the continents were barren wastelands, and the most complex life forms were simple bacterial mats in the oceans. The idea of any form of intelligent life, let alone a technological one, is by every scientific measure an absolute impossibility. yet the objects themselves are undeniably strange. They are small, typically just an inch or two in diameter, and they come in two main varieties. Some are made of a bluish steel-like metal with reddish spots and a magnetic quality, while others are composed of a white or off-white ceramic-like material. But it's their physical characteristics that have sparked the most intense debate. Many of these spheres have perfectly parallel grooves or ridges encircling their equators, lines that look uncannily precise and manufactured. Some appear to be etched into the surface with a symmetry that feels deliberate, not random. To the human eye, trained by centuries of industry and design, they don't look like something that simply tumbled out of a rock. They look crafted. This immediate, visceral impression of something made is the core of their mystery. For those who believe they are artificial, these grooves are the telltale marks of a lathe or some other precision machining tool, evidence of a technology that existed billions of years before humans walked the earth. This line of thinking naturally leads to extraordinary theories. If these spheres are manufactured, then who could have made them? The most popular, and certainly the most sensational, explanation points to extraterrestrial visitors. Proponents suggest that ancient astronauts or interstellar explorers visited our primordial planet and either lost these objects or deliberately left them behind, perhaps as some form of recording device or navigational aid. Others, delving into more esoteric territory, propose they could be evidence of a completely unknown chapter in Earth's history, a truly ancient, advanced civilization that rose and fell in the deep, dark past, leaving behind only these strange, metallic marbles as evidence of their existence. The sheer age of the spheres makes these ideas both irresistible and utterly unfalsifiable, placing them in a realm beyond conventional archaeological investigation. Geologists and mainstream scientists, however, have a very different and far more grounded explanation. They identify these objects as natural concretions. A concretion is a hard, compact mass of mineral matter that forms around a nucleus, a tiny fossil, a grain of sand, or even a drop of water within sedimentary rock. As mineral-rich water percolates through the rock over immense periods, it deposits layers of material around this nucleus, much like a pearl forming around a grain of sand in an oyster. The specific mineral involved here is most often pyrite, also known as fool's gold. Pyrite has a crystalline structure that can form in spheres under the right conditions of pressure and temperature. As for those seemingly perfect grooves, geologists attribute them to the natural process of crystal growth. The spheres can form in layers, and the boundary between these layers can create a visible seam or ridge. Furthermore, as the softer surrounding rock erodes away over billions of years, these harder, more resistant pyrite spheres are exposed, and the differential erosion can accentuate these lines, making them appear more precise and artificial than they originally were. Many specimens housed in museums like the Klerksdorp Museum show clear signs of this natural formation process, lacking the perfect symmetry often described in more sensational accounts. The debate over the Klerksdorp Spheres is a classic clash between pattern recognition and geological process. Humans are hardwired to see design and intention in patterns, a psychological phenomenon known as pareidolia. We see faces in clouds and hear words in static because our brains are optimized to find signal in noise. The grooves on these spheres trigger that same instinct. They look deliberate, so we assume they must be. Science, on the other hand, asks us to look for the simplest explanation that fits all the available evidence. In this case, the well-understood natural processes of concretion and mineralization provide a complete and logical explanation that does not require rewriting the entire history of life on Earth. Yet, the mystery persists in the popular imagination because it speaks to a deeper longing, a desire to find evidence that our planet's long, lonely history was not so lonely after all, that someone or something was here before us, leaving behind cryptic clues for us to find. Whether ultimately natural or not, the Klerksdorp Spheres serve a vital purpose. They force us to examine the line between what nature can accidentally create and what only intelligence can deliberately design, a fundamental question that lies at the very heart of the search for our origins. For a long time, the story of how the Americas were discovered was a simple one, taught in classrooms across the world. In 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. He was the first, the pioneer, the man who connected the old world and the new. But what if that story, the very bedrock of our historical narrative, was fundamentally incomplete? A tiny, unassuming artifact found on the coast of Maine challenges this cornerstone of history, suggesting that the Atlantic had been crossed centuries before Columbus ever set sail. This is the story of the Maine Penny, a small silver coin with enormous implications, discovered in 1957 during a meticulous archaeological dig at the Goddard site, a prehistoric Native American settlement on the coast of Maine. The coin was just one of tens of thousands of artifacts unearthed. But this one was different. While the vast majority of finds were stone tools and pottery shards indicative of the indigenous people who had lived there, this was a small, thin disc of tarnished silver. When experts finally cleaned and identified it, the result was stunning. It was a Norse coin, a silver penny minted during the reign of King Olaf Kyrre of Norway, dating to between 1065 and 1080. This was not just an old European coin, it was a Viking artifact, and it was found in a layer of soil carbon dated to the 1200s, over 200 years before Columbus was even born. The immediate and obvious conclusion is one that has excited historians and captured public imagination. This is tangible, physical proof of pre-Columbian transatlantic contact. It seems to perfectly corroborate the Icelandic sagas, the epic stories that tell of Leif Eriksson's journey to a land he called Vinland around the year 1000. The Goddard site, a known trading hub for Native American tribes, would have been the perfect place for such a coin to end up. Perhaps a Norse explorer, either from the known settlement at Elance Oaks Meadows in Newfoundland or from a yet-to-be-discovered camp further south, traded it directly to a Native American. It could have been part of a payment for furs, food, or safe passage. In this scenario, the Maine Penny is a smoking gun, a single piece of evidence that rewrites the history of exploration, proving that the Vikings not only reached North America, but also engaged in direct trade with its indigenous inhabitants. However, as with all compelling mysteries, the story is not so simple. The archaeological community is deeply divided on the coin's significance, and the doubts raised are not easily dismissed. Primary concern is one of context and provenance. The coin was found not in a pristine, sealed layer of undisturbed soil, but in a pit that also contained a mix of other materials from different time periods. While the soil around it was dated to the 1200s, the site itself was occupied for centuries, and the coin is a small, portable object. The most skeptical theory is that the coin is a modern intrusion. It could have been accidentally dropped by a collector living in the area in the 19th or early 20th century, when interest in Viking history was high and such coins were available on the antiquities market. It might even have been a deliberate planting, a hoax intended to cause exactly the kind of historical stir it has created. After all, it was the only Norse artifact found among 30,000 items at the site. Where are the other signs of contact? Where are the Norse tools, the weapons, the evidence of a settlement or even a temporary camp? A single coin, critics argue, is not enough to build a new history upon. it is an anomaly, an outlier that requires more evidence to be fully accepted. A more moderate, and perhaps more likely, explanation lies in the vast and complex trade networks that existed among Native American tribes long before European arrival. The coin may never have been touched by a Viking hand on American soil. Instead, it could have traveled incredible distances through indigenous trade routes. A Norse coin, perhaps lost or traded in Greenland or Iceland, could have been picked up by the Dorset or Thule people of the Arctic. From there, it could have been traded south, down through Labrador and into the networks of the eastern Algonquin tribes, passed from hand to hand over generations as a curiosity or a valuable piece of exotic material, eventually finding its way to the coast of Maine. This theory acknowledges the coin's authenticity and its ancient presence in the Americas without requiring proof of a sustained Viking presence deep within the continent. It suggests a more indirect but no less fascinating form of contact, an object crossing cultural boundaries through a chain of exchange, a whisper of a far-off world that arrived centuries before the shouts of conquest and colonization. The Maine Penny, therefore, is more than just a coin. It is a litmus test for how we interpret history. Do we see it as definitive proof that rewrites our textbooks, or do we treat it with caution, an intriguing puzzle piece that doesn't quite fit the picture without more pieces to support it? It highlights the immense power of a single artifact to challenge grand narratives, but it also teaches us about the rigorous standards required to confirm them. It reminds us that the past is not a simple timeline, but a complex web of interactions, possibilities, and lost stories. Whether it fell from a Viking pouch or arrived through a long chain of native traders, its very presence on that beach in Maine is a testament to the fact that the world has always been more connected than we sometimes imagine, and that history has a habit of hiding its most fascinating secrets in the most unexpected of places. While the Maine Penny offers a tantalizing glimpse into potential pre-Columbian trade, our next artifact propels us from the realm of terrestrial exploration into the far more speculative territory of interstellar contact. The story of the Dropa Stones begins in 1938, high in the remote Baigong Mountains bordering Tibet. According to the account, a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu Te and his students were exploring a series of caves when they made a series of bizarre discoveries. The caves showed clear signs of artificial intervention, with tunnels and passages carved directly into the rock, but it was inside these chambers that they allegedly found the true mysteries. First, they found rows of graves containing the skeletons of small, fragile-looking beings, each only a little over 4 feet tall with unusually large, elongated skulls. And then, scattered across the cave floor, they found hundreds of stone discs, each about a foot in diameter, with a perfect hole in the center and a fine, double-grooved spiral inscription running from the center to the rim. The tale only grows more extraordinary from there. The story goes that the discs, eventually numbering 716, were collected and stored away, largely forgotten until the 1960s, when a professor named Tsum Nui supposedly managed to decipher the tiny hieroglyphics etched into their grooves. His translation, we are told, revealed an astonishing narrative. The writing described a spacecraft from a distant planet that had crash-landed in the mountains 12,000 years ago. The inhabitants of the ship, the Dropa people, were unable to repair their vessel and found themselves stranded on Earth. The local Ham tribe who inhabited the region initially hunted and killed many of these strangers. Eventually, however, a fragile peace was established, but the Dropa could not adapt to Earth's environment and gradually died out. The stones, according to this interpretation, were their lasting record, a tragic chronicle of an alien encounter etched in stone. This incredible story has all the elements of a perfect science fiction saga. Ancient astronauts, a dramatic crash, interspecies conflict, and a poignant end. It's a narrative that has captured the imagination of the ancient astronaut theory community and become a cornerstone of popular UFO mythology. The physical description of the skeletons, small with large heads, neatly fits the modern archetype of a gray alien, making the story feel strangely contemporary and resonant. For those who want to believe in extraterrestrial visitation in humanity's deep past, the Dropa Stones are presented as some of the most compelling physical evidence, a first-hand account carved in rock. However, when we subject this story to the cold light of scrutiny, it begins to unravel at an alarming rate. The first and most glaring issue is the complete lack of verifiable evidence. Despite the claim that hundreds of these discs were found, not a single one has ever been produced for independent examination by the international scientific community. No photographs of the excavation exist, no credible scientific papers were ever published in a peer-reviewed journal, and the skeletons have never been analyzed. The very people at the center of the story are themselves unverifiable. There are no reliable records of an archaeologist named Kai Pu Te or a professor Tsum Nui working in China during those periods. The name Tsum Nui doesn't even sound authentically Chinese. Linguistic experts point out that it lacks the structure of a real Chinese name, sounding more like a clumsy invention. Most damningly, the entire story appears to have originated not from an academic source, but from a series of sensational articles in a German UFO magazine called Das Vegetarische Universum, the Vegetarian Universe, in the 1960s, written by an author named Reinhard Wegemann. It was then popularized in books by authors like Erich von Däniken. In essence, the Dropa Stones appear to be a classic example of a modern myth, a story crafted for a specific audience eager for evidence of ancient astronauts. Any actual stone discs that have been presented as Dropa Stones have, upon analysis, turned out to be common by discs, ancient Chinese ceremonial jade or stone artifacts with a center hole that were sometimes decorated with spirals, a symbol of eternity and cycles in Chinese culture. These are well known to archaeologists and have no connection to any mysterious writings or alien narratives. The enduring power of the Dropa Stones story, therefore, lies not in its historical truth but in its psychological appeal. It serves as a powerful cautionary tale about the human desire to find patterns and meaning, especially when it confirms our pre-existing hopes or fears about the universe. It highlights the critical difference between a compelling story and concrete evidence, and it demonstrates how easily a modern fabrication can be retrofitted onto the past, wrapped in the language of archaeology to lend it a false sense of credibility. The stones remind us that in our quest for cosmic companionship, for proof that we are not alone, we must be vigilant against the allure of a good story that feels true, and instead demand the rigorous, often less glamorous, standards of proof that true discovery requires. They are a monument not to ancient aliens, but to our own endless capacity for wonder and, at times, for self-deception. Moving from tales of alien chronicles to a document of undeniable reality, we encounter a map that is every bit as mysterious but grounded in tangible ink and parchment fact. In the year 1513, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis compiled a world map that has since become one of the most scrutinized and debated documents in history. He didn't claim to have explored these lands himself. Instead, he openly stated that he had drawn it using a multitude of source maps, some of which he described as being very old, dating back to the time of Alexander the Great. This admission is the first thread in a tapestry of intrigue, because the resulting map, now known as the Piri Reis Map, displays a knowledge of the world that seems to defy the era of its creation. The most startling feature of this map is its depiction of the northern coastline of a southern landmass, a continent we now call Antarctica. But this is not the Antarctica we know today, a mile-thick ice cap covering a hidden world. The map shows a landmass with coastlines, rivers, and what appear to be mountain ranges, features that could only be observed if the continent were free of its immense glacial covering. This presents a profound chronological problem. According to our current geological understanding, Antarctica has been locked in a deep freeze for millions of years. The last time its coasts were visibly ice-free and passable was over 6 million years ago, a time long before any humans, let alone any known civilization capable of advanced cartography, walked the Earth. So how could a 16th century Ottoman admiral have access to a chart showing Antarctica in such a state? The implication is staggering, that his ancient source maps were based on geographic knowledge gathered in a remote prehistoric epoch, preserved and passed down through lost cultures until fragments of it landed on his desk. This apparent anachronism has, understandably, fueled some of the most extraordinary theories in alternative history. Some proponents point to this as clear evidence of a highly advanced prehistoric civilization, perhaps the legendary Atlantis, which possessed the seafaring technology and scientific understanding to map the entire globe, including the Antarctic coastline, before some cataclysm erased them from history. Their knowledge, it is suggested, was preserved in great libraries like Alexandria, only to be scattered and lost, with fragments surviving in isolated pockets. Others take an even more radical step, proposing that the map's precision is the work of extraterrestrial cartographers who surveyed the Earth from above and shared their knowledge with early humans. From this perspective, the Piri Reis Map is not a human achievement but a gift, a piece of a celestial puzzle that we have been trying to understand for centuries. Mainstream historians and cartographers, however, approach the map with a different set of tools and a more conservative set of explanations. Their first argument often centers on misidentification. They suggest that the landmass labeled as Antarctica on the map might not be Antarctica at all. It could be a composite, distorted representation of the southern coast of South America, a coastline that was still being explored and poorly understood by Europeans in the early 1500s. Without accurate longitudinal measurements, early mapmakers often stretched and deformed continents, sometimes adding speculative landmasses to fill the empty spaces on their charts. Another compelling theory is that Piri Reis had access to source maps from secretive Portuguese or Spanish explorations that have since been lost to history. The age of exploration was a time of intense national rivalry, and maps were state secrets. It is entirely plausible that a well-connected admiral like Piri Reis could have obtained charts from voyages that official history never recorded, voyages that may have ventured much further south than we currently believe. These explorers might have encountered the northernmost tip of the Antarctic Peninsula, interpreted it as a new land, and sketched it accordingly. The true power of the Piri Reis Map lies not in proving one theory over another, but in what it represents, a permanent question mark etched onto parchment. It challenges our inherent assumption that historical progress is a straight line of accumulating knowledge. Instead, it suggests a messier, more intriguing reality, that knowledge can be lost, that golden ages can collapse, and that fragments of a deeper past can occasionally surface in the most unexpected places, like a message in a bottle from a forgotten world. This map forces us to humbly acknowledge that the past may not be a settled record but a vast, unexplored ocean, and that the most ancient charts we have might not be the beginning of the story, but merely a later copy of a much, much older one. But our journey through the evidence of lost knowledge now takes a fascinating turn from the cosmic to the aerodynamic, from maps of the world to a small wooden object that seems to defy gravity itself. In 1898, during an excavation of a tomb in Saqqara, Egypt, archaeologists uncovered a cache of everyday objects meant to accompany the deceased into the afterlife. Among these items was a small, lightweight model carved from sycamore wood. At first glance, it was catalogued simply as a figurine of a bird, a common enough funerary offering. It was given a date of roughly 200 BCE and placed in storage in the Cairo Museum, where it would remain largely unnoticed for decades. It wasn't until the 1970s that someone looked at this artifact with fresh eyes and saw something astonishing. This was no ordinary bird. This was the Saqqara bird, and its design suggested a principle of flight that humanity wouldn't master for another 2,000 years. The object is small, with a wingspan of just 7 inches, but its proportions are what sparked the controversy. Unlike a typical bird carving, which would have legs, feathers, and a recognizable beak, this object has a vertical tail fin that is perfectly straight and angled at 90 degrees to the body, much like the empennage on a modern airplane. Its wings are not rounded for flapping. They are smooth, aerofoil-shaped and angled slightly downward, a design feature known as dihedral that provides inherent stability in flight. The overall form is sleek, streamlined, and utterly lacking in the ornamental details you would expect on a ritual object. To many who have studied it, it looks less like a bird and more like a scale model of a monoplane glider or even an early prototype of an airplane. This striking resemblance has led to a compelling and controversial theory that the ancient Egyptians possessed a working understanding of aerodynamics. Proponents of this idea, including experienced aeronautical engineers, argue that the Saqqara bird is not a toy or a religious symbol, but a functional model. To test this hypothesis, exact replicas have been built and tested in wind tunnels and thrown by hand. The results are intriguing. When launched, the model does indeed fly, exhibiting a smooth, stable glide pattern. With the addition of a small horizontal stabilizer on the tail, a feature that some suggest might have broken off the original, its flight performance becomes even more impressive. This has led to speculation that the artifact could be a proof-of-concept model for a larger, working glider, perhaps used for ceremonial purposes or even as a child's toy. The implication is breathtaking that the seeds of human flight were first planted not in the workshops of the Renaissance or the garages of the 19th century, but in the Nile Valley over 2 millennia ago. The mainstream Egyptological perspective, however, offers a more grounded interpretation. To most scholars, the Saqqara bird is exactly what it was initially catalogued as, a stylized bird figurine. They point to the cultural context. The bird was a potent symbol in ancient Egypt, associated with several deities and the concept of the soul, or Ba, which was often depicted as a human-headed bird. The object was found with other funerary items, strengthening its connection to ritual and the afterlife. The straight tail, they argue, could easily represent a stylized bird's tail feather, and the lack of legs is common in many bird carvings meant to be placed flat on a surface. They see the aerofoil shape not as evidence of engineering, but as the simple, elegant result of an artisan carving a bird from a single piece of wood. The fact that it can glide is, from this viewpoint, a happy coincidence of its streamlined form, not proof of intentional design. The burden of proof, they maintain, is on those making the extraordinary claim, and a single, unique artifact is not enough to rewrite the history of technology. This clash of interpretations makes the Saqqara bird a perfect symbol for a broader philosophical debate. It forces us to ask a difficult question. Are we projecting our modern knowledge onto the past, seeing airplanes in every angled piece of wood because we live in an age of flight? Or have we been guilty of underestimating the innovative spirit of ancient cultures, too quickly dismissing their artifacts as merely ceremonial or decorative? The truth may lie somewhere in the middle. Perhaps the carver of the Saqqara bird was indeed a keen observer of nature, someone who noticed how a certain bird's wings cut through the air and unconsciously captured that principle in wood. Even if it was never intended to fly, its existence and its performance challenge us to look more carefully at the artifacts we've labeled as simple. It suggests that the line between art and science, between ritual and research, might have been far blurrier in the ancient world than we have previously assumed. The Saqqara bird may not prove that the Egyptians had an air force, but it absolutely soars as a reminder to keep an open mind, because sometimes the key to a future breakthrough has been sitting in a museum drawer, waiting for someone to truly see it. Yet the sheer scale and precision of the Nazca Lines present a puzzle that goes far beyond simple ritual. How did a culture without the wheel, without written language, and without any system of aerial surveillance conceive of, and then execute designs so vast they can only be fully appreciated from the sky? The process would have required sophisticated mathematical planning and advanced surveying tools to transfer small-scale models onto the desert canvas with such flawless proportions. One theory suggests they might have used a grid system, painstakingly scaling up the designs from a smaller diagram by using ropes and stakes to mark out the lines. The execution itself was a feat of simple yet effective engineering. The Nazca people likely cleared the dark, sun-baked surface stones to reveal the lighter, sandy soil beneath, creating a striking contrast. These cleared pathways, only a few inches deep, have endured for centuries because of the region's unique climate, little rainfall to erode them and steady winds that sweep away the sand that could otherwise obscure them. This combination of clever technique and perfect environmental conditions resulted in geoglyphs of breathtaking permanence. This incredible achievement has inevitably inspired theories that reach beyond conventional archaeology. The most popular and enduring alternative explanation is that the lines served as signals or even landing strips for extraterrestrial visitors. From this perspective, the giant figures and long, straight lines make perfect sense as navigational aids for spacecraft, with the animal glyphs acting as identifiers for specific landing zones. The famous astronaut figure, a humanoid with what appears to be a large helmet, is often held up as direct evidence of this otherworldly contact. Proponents argue that the Nazca people, directed by these advanced beings, created the marks for a purpose they themselves may not have fully understood. This theory taps into a deep-seated human wonder about the cosmos and our place within it, offering a dramatic and captivating solution to the mystery. Mainstream archaeology, however, paints a far more nuanced and culturally grounded picture, one that is in many ways just as fascinating. The prevailing view is that the lines were intimately connected to the Nazca people's spiritual beliefs and their desperate struggle to survive in an arid environment. Many of the lines lead to sources of water, and the animal figures, the hummingbird, the monkey, the orca, are believed to represent deities or spirits associated with water and fertility. Scholars propose that the geoglyphs formed a vast sacred landscape, a ritual pathway used for ceremonial processions to plead with the gods for life-giving rain. By walking these lines, the Nazca people may have believed they were activating a connection to the divine, their footsteps a form of prayer written on the earth itself. The fact that the designs are best viewed from above is seen not as proof of alien pilots, but as an offering to the gods who dwelled in the sky. From their celestial vantage point, the deities could look down and see the devotion of their people etched permanently into the land. The true legacy of the Nazca Lines lies in this very tension between the extraordinary and the earthly. They challenge our modern tendency to equate technological sophistication with complexity and to dismiss ancient cultures as primitive. The Nazca did not need alien intervention. They possessed their own profound sophistication, a deep understanding of their environment, and a remarkable ability for large-scale, coordinated community action. Their achievement forces us to expand our definition of technology to include not just gears and engines, but also social organization, artistic vision, and a mastery of landscape. The lines are a stunning reminder that human ingenuity can manifest in countless forms, and that some of our greatest monuments were built not with steel, but with faith, patience, and a simple, brilliant understanding of the earth beneath our feet. Now we journey from the vast, sun-baked plains of Nazca to a small private collection in Peru, where we find one of the most visually spectacular and intellectually contentious sets of artifacts in the entire world of alternative history, the Ica Stones. This is not a single tool, but a library of over 15,000 carved andesite rocks, each one telling a story that seems to tear pages right out of our history books. The images etched into their dark surfaces are nothing short of astonishing. They depict scenes that are, by every standard account, impossible. Human figures riding on the backs of creatures we would instantly recognize as Triceratops, Stegosaurus, and pterodactyls. Detailed illustrations of advanced medical procedures, including open-heart surgery and complex organ transplants, performed by people using tools, maps of the world showing unknown continents and geographical knowledge that shouldn't have existed in ancient times. If these stones are authentic, they are not merely out of place. They are a nuclear bomb detonating at the very foundation of archaeology, biology, and human history. The story of their discovery is as murky as the river stones themselves. They first came to widespread attention in the 1960s through a Peruvian physician named Dr. Javier Cabrera. He claimed the stones were found by local farmers in ancient burial caves near the town of Ica and began collecting them, eventually opening a museum to display his vast and growing collection. The narrative was compelling. Here was physical proof that an advanced civilization, predating the Inca by thousands of years, coexisted with dinosaurs and possessed medical and astronomical knowledge that rivaled our own. For those who believe in lost continents like Lemuria or Atlantis, the Ica stones were presented as the ultimate smoking gun, a carved record of a world we have completely forgotten. However, the authenticity of the stones began to crumble under the weight of scientific scrutiny almost immediately. The most damning evidence came from the very source. In 1973, after pressure from authorities, the Basilio Ashuya, one of the farmers who supplied the stones, admitted in a BBC interview that he and his family had carved the stones themselves using metal tools and then aged them by baking them in cow dung to give them a patina of antiquity. He demonstrated the process, showing how he used pictures from comic books and textbooks as inspiration for the dinosaur designs. He stated his motive was simple economics. He could sell the carved stones to tourists and collectors for far more money than he could make farming. Other farmers later came forward with similar confessions. Furthermore, geologists who examined the stones noted that the patina, the thin layer of natural varnish that forms on ancient rocks, was only present in the grooves of a few stones, suggesting the carvings were recent. On most, the carved lines were fresh and sharp, showing no signs of the weathering that would be expected on objects claimed to be thousands of years old. Despite these confessions and scientific assessments, a small but vocal group of proponents continues to argue for the stone's legitimacy. They suggest the farmers may have confessed to avoid prosecution for looting ancient graves, a serious crime in Peru. They point to a few stones that were allegedly found in officially documented archaeological contexts, though these claims are difficult to verify. The true power of the Ica stones, therefore, lies not in what they tell us about the past, but in what they reveal about ourselves. They are a masterclass in the psychological phenomenon of confirmation bias, the powerful, often unconscious tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs. For those already convinced of the reality of ancient advanced civilizations or human-dinosaur coexistence, the stones were irresistible. Their sheer number and the consistency of their imagery felt like too much to be a hoax. The desire for them to be real overrode the critical thinking required to ask basic questions about their provenance. Where were the precise excavation records? Why did the style of carving vary so dramatically from stone to stone? Why were there no other associated artifacts, no tools used to make them, no pottery, no human remains found in the same context? The legacy of the Ica stones is a crucial cautionary tale for anyone fascinated by historical mysteries. They highlight the absolute importance of provenance, the documented history of an object's discovery, which is the bedrock of legitimate archaeology. An artifact without a clear and scientifically recorded context is essentially a story without a source, vulnerable to being co-opted by any narrative. The stones also demonstrate the danger of relying on the artifact itself to prove its own authenticity. The most compelling fakes are designed to do just that. Ultimately, the Ica stones serve as a permanent monument to the enduring battle between wonder and skepticism. They remind us that our hunger for a more exciting, mysterious past can sometimes blind us to the simpler, more mundane truth, and that in the quest for knowledge, the most important tool we have is not a carved stone, but a critical, questioning mind. But while the Ica stones represent a mystery likely born from modern hands, our next artifact presents a puzzle crafted centuries ago, one that has resisted every attempt at a solution with an almost supernatural stubbornness. Tucked away in the Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library at Yale University is a book that shouldn't exist, or at least one that refuses to make sense. This is the Voynich Manuscript, a 240-page codex that is arguably the most famous unreadable book in the world. Its vellum pages have been carbon-dated to the early 15th century, placing its creation in northern Italy during the Renaissance, a time of flourishing art and science. Yet, this book is an island of utter mystery in that sea of knowledge. Every single one of its words is written in a unique, flowing script that has never been seen anywhere else on Earth. It is not a known language written in a strange alphabet. It is an entire writing system that appears to be completely invented, a cipher that has defied the world's greatest cryptographers, linguists, and codebreakers for over 6 centuries. The text itself is only half the mystery. The manuscript is lavishly illustrated with bizarre and intricate drawings that seem to categorize a world both familiar and utterly alien. The book is generally divided into sections based on these images. There is a vast herbal section, filled with paintings of plants that are botanically plausible yet unidentifiable, possessing strange roots and leaves that don't match any known species. This flows into an astronomical section, featuring circular charts of the stars, suns, and moons that seem symbolic rather than literal, with zodiac-like medallions and nude women bathing in intricately plumbed tubes and pools. Another section is biological, depicting countless small, naked women dubbed nymphs by researchers cavorting in what appears to be a complex system of interconnected baths and vessels, suggesting a strange allegory for human biology or alchemical processes. Finally, there is a pharmaceutical section showing drawings of isolated plant roots and leaves alongside apothecary jars, implying a book of recipes or remedies whose ingredients and instructions are locked away behind the impenetrable text. This combination of compelling visual clues and utterly inscrutable text has made the manuscript a magnet for theories, each more fascinating than the last. The most straightforward theory is that it is a pharmacopoeia or herbal manual containing the secret knowledge of a skilled apothecary who encoded his recipes to protect his trade secrets. Others propose it is the work of a medieval alchemist, a symbolic grimoire where the text is not a language to be read but a key to unlocking a state of mind for spiritual transformation. The astronomical diagrams have led some to suggest it is a work of early science, perhaps detailing a unique cosmological model. Then there are the more radical ideas that it is the sole surviving work of a lost culture, a message from extraterrestrials, or even the deliberate creation of a mental patient, a stream of unconsciousness given beautiful form. For a time, one popular theory even held that it was an elaborate hoax created by its namesake, Wilfrid Voynich, the Polish book dealer who brought it to light in 1912, though the carbon dating has definitively proven the vellum is centuries older than him. The manuscript's resistance to decipherment is what truly elevates it from a curiosity to a legend. It has survived the scrutiny of the finest minds in cryptography. World War II codebreakers, the very men and women who cracked the infamous Enigma machine, turned their skills to the Voynich and were utterly defeated. Modern supercomputers running complex statistical analyses have determined that the text has patterns consistent with a natural language. It isn't random gibberish, but they have been unable to match it to any linguistic family. The words follow a kind of internal grammar, but it is a grammar we cannot parse. This has led some researchers to propose it is an extremely sophisticated cipher, one that goes beyond simple letter substitution to encode meaning in a way that has so far proven flawless. The most recent theory, gaining some traction, suggests it could be written in a Proto-Romance language, a vernacular tongue that was never formally written down, using a unique invented alphabet. But even this promising lead has yet to produce a coherent translation. The true power of the Voynich manuscript lies not in any single theory, but in what it represents, the pure, uncorrupted allure of the unsolved. In an age where information is instantly accessible, the Voynich stands as a monument to the limits of our understanding. It is a tangible reminder that the past is not a conquered territory, but a landscape still dotted with regions marked, "Here be dragons." It challenges the arrogance of the present, humbling us with the fact that a simple book made of animal skin and ink can still guard its secrets from the full force of modern science and scholarship. It is a siren's call to the curious, a permanent invitation to look closer, to think differently, and to never stop wondering about the beautiful, inexplicable mysteries that still wait to be uncovered. Deep in the lush river deltas and jungle-covered landscapes of Costa Rica, a different kind of mystery lies half buried in the earth, not a cryptic manuscript or a misplaced tool, but a collection of silent, perfect forms. These are the stone spheres of Costa Rica, or as they are locally known, Los Bolas, ranging from the size of a bowling ball to colossal orbs over 2 meters in diameter and weighing up to 16 tons. They are a breathtaking feat of precision and patience. Discovered in the 1930s when the United Fruit Company was clearing land for banana plantations, these spheres were found in groups, sometimes arranged in straight lines, wide curves, or geometric patterns, as if placed with a specific, though now inscrutable, intention. They were crafted by the Diquis culture, a pre-Columbian people who flourished in the region from around 300 BCE until the Spanish conquest in the 1500s. Yet, despite knowing who made them, the how and the why of these stones remain two of the most captivating puzzles in all of archaeology. The first layer of the mystery is their sheer perfection. These are not roughly hewn boulders. They are near-perfect spheres with a precision that is astonishing for a culture that, as far as we know, worked without metal tools, without the wheel, and without written language. The material is granodiorite, a hard, igneous rock similar to granite. How did the Dikwis artisans achieve such flawless symmetry? The prevailing theory is a process of meticulous pecking, grinding, and polishing. They likely identified large boulders with the right potential and then used other, harder stones to systematically chip away at the surface. Through a painstaking process that would have taken generations for the largest spheres, they would have gradually shaped the rock, using sand and water as abrasives to smooth it into its final, impossibly round form. The real genius, however, may have been in their quality control. Some researchers suggest they might have used a simple but effective method, hanging a stone from a cord and using its shadow or a fixed point to check for high spots as they slowly rotated it, removing any imperfections until no shadow was cast. This simple technique could account for the breathtaking accuracy that continues to baffle modern engineers. But the question of method is quickly overshadowed by the deeper enigma of purpose. Why would a society devote such immense, generations-long labor to creating hundreds of these objects? The most romantic and popular theory is an astronomical one. The arrangements of the spheres, some of which were found aligned in specific patterns, could have functioned as a massive celestial calendar or observatory. Certain alignments might have pointed to the rising and setting of the sun during solstices and equinoxes, or tracked important stars, helping to regulate agricultural cycles and religious ceremonies. In this view, the spheres were not just art, they were a sophisticated scientific instrument carved into the landscape itself. Another compelling theory positions them as symbols of social power and status. The spheres, especially the largest and most perfect ones, might have been commissioned by powerful chieftains or shamans and placed prominently near their dwellings or in public plazas. Their size and perfection would have been a clear, undeniable statement of a leader's authority, his ability to command the labor and skill necessary to create such marvels. They could have marked territorial boundaries, sacred spaces, or ancestral burial grounds, serving as permanent stone embodiments of a community's identity and power. There is, however, a more subtle and profound possibility. The Dikwis culture, like many Mesoamerican societies, lived in a world where the celestial and the earthly were deeply intertwined. The sphere is a powerful, universal symbol of perfection, eternity, and the cosmos. The act of taking a rough, chaotic piece of the earth and transforming it into a perfect, man-made representation of the heavens could have been, in itself, a profoundly spiritual act. The creation process might have been a form of ritual, a way to bring order to chaos and to harmonize human existence with the perfect order of the universe. The purpose, then, may not have been purely practical or political, but deeply philosophical, a physical meditation on the nature of existence, permanence, and humanity's place within the cosmic order. The true legacy of the stone spheres is not found in a single answer, but in the humbling questions they force us to ask about ancient achievement. We often measure past cultures by a narrow standard of technological progress, looking for evidence of metals, wheels, and writing. The Dikwis people challenge this hierarchy. They demonstrate that a society can achieve a level of sophistication that is not necessarily technological in our modern sense, but is instead a sophisticated blend of artistic vision, communal organization, and profound symbolic thought. Their mastery was not over engines but over stone, time, and meaning. They remind us that innovation is not a single path, but a vast landscape of human creativity. The spheres stand today, some still in their original alignments, others moved to museums or town squares as silent sentinels from a world that thought in circles, a world that understood that sometimes the most powerful statement is not a complex machine, but a perfect, simple, and enduring form. Perhaps no other artifact in human history sits so perfectly at the crossroads of faith, science, and mystery as the Shroud of Turin. This 14.5-foot long linen cloth, housed in the Cathedral of St. John the Baptist in Turin, Italy, bears the faint, haunting imprint of a man who appears to have suffered the torturous injuries of crucifixion. For millions of the faithful, this is not an image at all, but a sacred relic, the actual burial shroud that wrapped the body of Jesus Christ after his descent from the cross. Its mysterious markings a divine, miraculous record of his passion and resurrection. This belief transforms the shroud from a simple piece of fabric into a tangible object of veneration, a physical connection to the most pivotal event in Christian history. Yet for scientists, historians, and skeptics, the shroud presents an enigma of a different kind, a forensic puzzle, a historical detective story, and perhaps the most sophisticated and controversial artistic hoax ever perpetrated. The scientific investigation of the shroud, particularly in the modern era, reads like a thriller, with each new revelation seeming to deepen the mystery rather than solve it. The image itself is incredibly subtle. It is not painted with any known pigment. Instead, it is a superficial discoloration of the topmost fibrils of the linen threads, as if the cloth was lightly scorched. The detail is photographically negative. This astonishing fact wasn't discovered until 1898, when amateur photographer Secondo Pia took the first official photographs of the shroud and was stunned to see that the negative plate revealed a strikingly clear and positive-looking image of a man, with all the wounds described in the gospel narratives vividly displayed. This discovery catapulted the shroud into the 20th century, making it a subject for rigorous scientific scrutiny. Subsequent studies, most notably the extensive Shroud of Turin research project investigation in 1978, deployed a battery of advanced tools, spectroscopy, radiography, and microscopic analysis, yet failed to conclusively explain how the image was formed. The scientists concluded it was not a painting, and that the image encoded three-dimensional information, something no medieval artist could have conceived of, let alone executed. The debate seemed to reach its climax in 1988, when the Vatican permitted a small sample of the shroud to be subjected to radiocarbon, dating by 3 independent laboratories in Oxford, Zurich, and Tucson. The results, published to worldwide attention, dated the linen to between 1260 and 1390, with a 95% confidence level. For many, this was the final, definitive word. The shroud was a medieval forgery, created in the very period when the trade in religious relics was at its peak. Case closed, yet rather than ending the controversy, the carbon dating only fueled it. Proponents of the shroud's authenticity immediately raised a host of objections. They argued the sample taken was from a poorly chosen area, a medieval patch woven into the original cloth to repair damage from a fire in the 16th century. They pointed to potential contamination from the fire itself, which could have introduced newer carbon isotopes, skewing the results younger. Some researchers even proposed that a hypothetical burst of neutron radiation from a miraculous event could have altered the carbon signature. While these claims are viewed with deep skepticism by the majority of the scientific community, they illustrate how the shroud effortlessly resists any single, simple explanation. This relentless push and pull between evidence and belief is what makes the Shroud of Turin a quintessential out-of-place artifact, though its dislocation is not in time but in understanding. It exists in a liminal space between the empirical and the spiritual. If it is a medieval creation, then we are forced to confront the identity of a forgotten genius, an artist or scientist who, centuries before the invention of photography, developed a bafflingly complex technique to create an image that continues to defy reproduction even with modern technology. What was their motive? Was it a work of devotional art intended to inspire faith, or a deliberate deception designed to profit from it? Conversely, if the shroud is authentic, it challenges the very foundations of materialistic science, suggesting a phenomenon beyond our current comprehension, a moment where history and mystery collided and left a permanent mark on a simple piece of cloth. Ultimately, the shroud's greatest significance may not lie in proving or disproving a historical event, but in what it reveals about us. It serves as a powerful mirror, reflecting our deepest desires for proof, our struggle to reconcile faith with reason, and our endless fascination with the unknown. It is an artifact that is studied under microscopes and worshipped on knees, a symbol that means entirely different things to different people. In a world increasingly divided between the secular and the sacred, the Shroud of Turin stands as a permanent, silent testament to the human need to search for meaning, to touch the divine, and to find, in the faintest of impressions, a story that speaks to something far greater than ourselves. Stepping out of the realm of shrouds and into the brilliant Egyptian sun, we find ourselves at the entrance of the Hathor Temple in Dendera, gazing up at a wall carving that has become a cornerstone of alternative history. This is the famous Dendera light relief, and at first glance it seems to show something astonishingly anachronistic. The central image depicts a large, elongated bulb-like object, with a snaking wire or cable leading from its base to a box that is held by a kneeling figure. Inside this bulb, a serpent stretches along its length, its head touching the tip. To the modern eye, this looks uncannily like a giant incandescent light bulb. The serpent is the filament, the bulb is the glass envelope, and the cable connects to a power source or battery. The entire scene is supported by a pillar-like device called a jed, which some interpret as a high-voltage insulator. For proponents of this theory, this is not symbolic art. It is a technical diagram, clear evidence that the ancient Egyptians possessed and utilized electric lighting, a technology we wouldn't reinvent for another 2,000 years. The implications of this interpretation are, of course, revolutionary. It would solve one of Egyptology's most practical and enduring mysteries. How did the artists and builders of the New Kingdom work deep inside windowless tombs and temples, like those in the Valley of the Kings, with such incredible precision? The walls and ceilings of these subterranean complexes are covered in intricate hieroglyphs and paintings, yet not a single trace of soot from torches or oil lamps has been found in many of these chambers. If they weren't using fire-based lighting, what did they use? The Dendera relief seems to provide a perfect answer. This theory suggests that the priests of Hathor guarded the secret of this technology, using it to illuminate their sacred spaces and perhaps even awe worshippers with what would have seemed like divine, magical power. The resemblance to modern electrical components is so striking that it has inspired numerous modern experiments. Engineers have built working models based on the carving's design, using period-appropriate materials like clay jars and copper wire to create rudimentary arc lamps that produce a strong, flickering light, proving that the concept is at least physically possible with known ancient materials. However, to mainstream Egyptologists, this interpretation is a classic case of pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar shapes in ambiguous patterns, like seeing animals in clouds. Their explanation, grounded in a deep understanding of Egyptian mythology and iconography, is both more complex and, in its own way, far more fascinating. They identify the bulb not as a technological device but as a symbol of creation and life, a lotus flower from which the snake god Harsomptus is emerging. In Egyptian cosmology, the lotus is profoundly significant, representing the primordial mound from which all life sprang at the dawn of creation. The serpent inside it is a common representation of a deity, and the entire scene is not a lighting manual, but a depiction of a foundational myth. The cable is interpreted as a stylized lotus stem or an umbilical cord, connecting the symbol of life to the box, which is not a battery but a shrine or a jed pillar, a symbol of stability and the backbone of the god Osiris. The kneeling figure is not an electrician but a god or spirit assisting in this divine birth. The entire tableau is a snapshot of a spiritual concept, not an electrical one, meant to be read by a priesthood deeply literate in a complex symbolic language that we are only partially fluent in today. This stark divide in interpretation makes the Dendera relief a powerful case study in how we view the past. It forces us to confront a critical question. Are we seeing the carving through the lens of our own technologically saturated world, projecting our understanding of light bulbs onto a culture that thought in entirely different terms? Or have we underestimated the innovative spirit of the ancients, too quickly dismissing their potential for discovery because it doesn't fit our linear timeline of progress? The truth likely lies in a nuanced middle ground. While the literal light bulb interpretation is almost certainly a modern misreading, it encourages a valuable line of inquiry. It pushes us to ask how the ancient Egyptians did achieve their lighting feats. Archaeologists point to the discovery of countless examples of sophisticated lamp technology, including reflective metal mirrors that could amplify the light of a single wick, and the use of cleverly angled shafts to channel sunlight deep into structures for short periods. The absence of soot may be due to diligent cleaning or the use of clean burning oils in well-ventilated areas. The Dendera carving, therefore, may not depict an electric light, but it stands as a permanent stone question mark, challenging us to look beyond our own assumptions and appreciate the ancient world not for its resemblance to our own, but for its unique and profound genius in mastering its environment with the tools and concepts it had at hand. Leaving behind the grand temples of Egypt, our journey takes us next to the private collections of Colombia, where an unassuming stone disc has sparked a debate that cuts to the very heart of how we interpret the ancient world. Known as the genetic disc, this black, circular object made of lyddite, an incredibly hard stone, measures roughly 22 centimeters in diameter and is about a centimeter thick. Its surface is not blank. It is a canvas of meticulously carved symbols and scenes that, to a modern eye, seem to tell a story of life itself. On one side, we see clear, unmistakable depictions of a sperm cell wriggling toward an ovum. On the other, a series of images show the development of a fetus within a womb, from a small cluster of cells to a fully formed baby, complete with umbilical cord. Surrounding these central images are carvings of tools, strange humanoid figures with oversized heads, and various animals. If these images are taken at face value, they suggest a knowledge of human reproduction and cellular biology that is nothing short of miraculous for an object allegedly carved 6,000 years ago, a time when humanity was believed to be in the early stages of agriculture and stone tool making. This startling interpretation is the foundation of the disc's status as an out-of-place artifact. Proponents argue that the precision of the biological imagery is too accurate to be coincidental or purely symbolic. They see it as a form of ancient scientific textbook, a record of advanced biological understanding that was somehow possessed by a prehistoric culture. This leads to the inevitable sensational theories. Was this knowledge given to early humans by a more advanced, perhaps even extraterrestrial civilization? Or does it point to a lost human society that achieved a sophisticated level of scientific inquiry, only to have all traces of its existence vanish except for this one enigmatic disk? The very name genetic disk implies a certainty about its purpose, framing it not as an object of art but as a deliberate record of scientific observation, a concept that would redefine our entire understanding of humanity's intellectual journey. Mainstream archaeology, however, approaches the genetic disk with profound caution and a heavy dose of skepticism. The first and most significant issue is its complete lack of provenance. The disk did not emerge from a controlled archaeological dig with documented stratigraphy and associated artifacts that could confirm its age and cultural context. Instead, it was reportedly found by a collector, and its 6,000-year age is an estimate based on style and material, not rigorous scientific dating. Without a clear archaeological context, the door is wide open for it to be a modern creation, a clever hoax designed to appeal to the fascination with ancient mysteries. Even if it is genuinely old, archaeologists warn against the dangerous practice of interpreting ancient symbols through an exclusively modern lens, a concept known as ethnocentric projection. The carvings that look like a sperm and egg to a biologist in the 21st century might have represented something entirely different to the person who carved them 6 millennia ago. They could be symbolic representations of fertility, abstract patterns, or depictions of mythological creatures and events that we simply no longer understand. A wriggling line might be a water serpent or a symbol for a river, not a spermatozoon. A circle with a dot in the center could represent the sun or a celestial body, not an ovum. This clash of interpretations makes the genetic disk a perfect case study in the challenges of archaeology. It highlights the immense gap that exists between an object's creation and our modern attempt to understand it. We are separated by thousands of years of cultural evolution, lost languages, and vanished belief systems. When we look at an ancient carving, we are essentially trying to read a book where we know the alphabet but have completely lost the dictionary and the cultural context needed to understand the meaning of the words. The temptation to fill that void with our own knowledge is incredibly powerful, but it risks creating a past in our own image rather than discovering the past as it truly was. The true lesson of the genetic disk may not be about ancient biologists, but about ourselves and our own desire to find confirmation of our modern worldview in the artifacts of deep time. It stands as a powerful reminder to hold two ideas in balance: a sense of wonder at the incredible creativity and sophistication of ancient cultures, and a disciplined skepticism that demands rigorous evidence before leaping to extraordinary conclusions. It teaches us that sometimes the most mysterious thing about an ancient artifact is not the intention of its creator, but the powerful filter of our own perception. Now, let's travel from the private collections of Colombia to the high-altitude plains of Bolivia, where a humble stone bowl sits at the center of one of the most audacious claims in all of archaeology. This is the Fuente Magna Bowl, often dramatically nicknamed the Rosetta Stone of the Americas. Discovered in the 1950s near Lake Titicaca by a local farmer, the bowl initially seemed like just another pre-Columbian artifact. But a closer look revealed something that should not have been there. Etched into its interior and around its rim are two distinct types of writing. One style is reminiscent of local iconography, but the other is astonishingly similar to cuneiform, the wedge-shaped script invented by the Sumerians in ancient Mesopotamia, a civilization that flourished over 4,000 miles and a vast ocean away. If these inscriptions are genuine and ancient, they don't just suggest a coincidence, they scream of a transoceanic connection that rewrites the entire story of the ancient world. The implications of this are nothing short of seismic. Mainstream history has long held that the great civilizations of the Old World and the New World developed in complete isolation from one another until Columbus's fateful voyage in 1492. The Fuente Magna Bowl challenges that isolationist narrative head-on. It proposes a breathtaking possibility that Sumerian sailors, renowned for their seafaring trade across the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean, might have somehow ventured far beyond the known world. Could their ships have been caught in currents that carried them across the Atlantic, or did they possess navigational knowledge and maritime technology far more advanced than we've ever given them credit for? If they reached the shores of South America, they would have encountered the early cultures of the Andes, potentially leading to an exchange of ideas, language, and technology. This bowl, then, might be a tangible relic of that incredible meeting, a Sumerian object used in a Bolivian context, or a local object inscribed with a script learned from mysterious visitors. Naturally, an artifact with such revolutionary claims faces intense skepticism, and the arguments against its authenticity are formidable. The first and most critical issue is once again a complete lack of secure provenance. The bowl was not uncovered by archaeologists in a carefully documented dig. It was a chance find by a farmer, and its exact original location and the soil layers it came from were never properly recorded. This makes it impossible to date the object using reliable stratigraphic methods or to confirm what other artifacts it was associated with. Without this crucial context, it is vulnerable to accusations of being a modern hoax. Skeptics suggest it could be a genuine pre-Columbian bowl that was later etched with fake cuneiform in the 20th century, perhaps to increase its value on the antiquities market or to fuel a deliberate historical deception. Furthermore, some linguists who have examined the script argue that it is not proper, coherent cuneiform, but rather a clumsy imitation, a series of marks that look superficially like wedges but don't form any legible words or known Sumerian symbols. They see it as a case of pseudo-script, where an forger attempted to copy the style without understanding the language itself. Yet, despite these serious doubts, the Fuente Magna bowl continues to captivate a segment of researchers. They point to analysis that suggests the patina and where on the inscriptions appear consistent with great age, indicating the carvings weren't made recently. Some have even proposed tentative translations, interpreting the symbols as dedicatory texts to a Sumerian fertility goddess, Nia, which would be fitting for a ceremonial bowl. While these translations are highly controversial and not accepted by mainstream Assyriologists, they keep the embers of the mystery glowing. The bowl forces us to confront a deeply uncomfortable question for archaeology. How do we handle a single, extraordinary piece of evidence that contradicts a well-established historical model? Do we dismiss it immediately due to its problematic origins, or do we allow it to open a door to speculative, albeit radical, possibilities? The true significance of the Fuente Magna bowl may ultimately lie not in proving a Sumerian presence in Bolivia, but in what it represents for our imagination of the ancient world. It serves as a powerful symbol for the diffusionist versus isolationist debate that has raged for centuries. The isolationist view, which has been the academic standard, sees human cultures as independent inventors, rising to complexity on their own. The diffusionist view allows for more cross-pollination, for the brave and curious to travel immense distances and share ideas. While the bowl is far from conclusive evidence for diffusion, it embodies that tantalizing possibility. It encourages us to picture the ancient world not as a series of isolated islands of civilization, but as a potential web of faint, forgotten connections. Perhaps the oceans were not absolute barriers, but highways occasionally traveled by the most adventurous souls. Whether a priceless key to a lost history or an elaborate modern ruse, the Fuente Magna bowl challenges us to remember that history is written by the evidence we find, and sometimes the most world-shattering discoveries are found not in a royal tomb, but lying in a farmer's field, waiting for someone to read the message it carries. But our journey now takes us from the highlands of Bolivia to the lush, rugged bushland of New South Wales, Australia, where a series of strange markings carved into a remote sandstone outcrop have ignited a firestorm of controversy and wild speculation. Known as the Gosford Glyphs, these carvings are found in the Brisbane Water National Park, about an hour north of Sydney. To the untrained eye, they present an utterly baffling sight. Rows of deeply etched symbols that bear a striking, superficial resemblance to ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. There are images of scarab beetles, Anubis the jackal-headed god, and even what appears to be a depiction of the deity Sobek, the crocodile god. The immediate, sensational conclusion seems almost inevitable. Did ancient Egyptian sailors, masters of the Mediterranean, somehow cross the Indian and Pacific Oceans to land on the shores of Australia over 2,000 years before Captain Cook? It's a narrative straight out of an adventure novel, suggesting a prehistoric global connection that would completely rewrite the history of human exploration. The story built around these glyphs is as elaborate as the carvings themselves. Proponents of their authenticity have even provided a translation, a dramatic tale of two Egyptian noblemen, sons of a pharaoh, who sailed to this strange land. According to this interpreted narrative, one of the brothers died in Australia, and the carvings serve as his funerary inscription, a tragic lament carved in stone by his grieving sibling. This poignant story, combined with the exotic location, has made the Gosford Glyphs a pilgrimage site for alternative history enthusiasts and a favorite topic for documentaries exploring ancient transoceanic contact. The sheer improbability of it all is precisely what makes it so compelling. The idea that a piece of the Nile Valley could be found hidden in the Australian bush is a powerful testament to human curiosity and our desire for a more interconnected ancient world. However, when subjected to the rigorous scrutiny of Egyptologists and archaeologists, this captivating story unravels with almost comical speed. The first and most definitive red flag is the content of the hieroglyphs themselves. While they look Egyptian to a casual observer, to an expert, they are a nonsensical jumble. The symbols are a mix of styles from vastly different Egyptian time periods, carved next to each other in a way that no authentic Egyptian scribe would ever have done. It's the equivalent of finding a medieval illuminated manuscript written in a mix of modern English text message slang and Shakespearean English. It immediately signals a forgery. Furthermore, the purported translation is linguistically impossible. The grammar is absent, the symbols don't form coherent words or sentences. They are merely pictures placed in a row, mimicking the appearance of writing without any of its underlying structure. It would be like someone who doesn't know English trying to forge a letter by randomly stringing together letters from the alphabet. The result might look like writing from a distance, but up close, it's meaningless. The most plausible explanation for the Gosford Glyphs is far more recent and much less romantic. The consensus among scholars is that they are a 20th century hoax, likely created in the 1920s or 30s. During this period, Australia was experiencing a wave of Egyptomania, fueled by the global fascination following the discovery of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922. It was also a time when returning World War I soldiers, many of whom had served in Egypt and the Middle East, would have been familiar with the general look of hieroglyphs. The glyphs show clear evidence of being carved with modern metal tools, not the stone implements an ancient Egyptian would have used, and they lack the deep, ancient patina that should have developed over millennia. Local history even provides a potential culprit, a Yugoslavian immigrant and amateur sculptor who lived in the area in the 1930s and was known for his interest in Egypt. While not definitively proven, this origin story is infinitely more likely than a transglobal voyage by ancient Egyptians. The true importance of the Gosford Glyphs, therefore, lies not in what they tell us about ancient history, but in what they reveal about our own modern desires and the pitfalls of amateur archaeology. They are a masterclass in the dangers of misinterpretation and the human tendency toward pareidolia, seeing familiar patterns like Egyptian writing in random or man-made shapes. This site also highlights the critical importance of consulting genuine expertise. An individual with a passionate interest but no formal training can easily misidentify something, especially when that misinterpretation confirms a pre-existing, exciting belief. The glyphs also stand uncomfortably at the intersection of different cultures. In the rush to see Egyptians in Australia, well-meaning enthusiasts have often overlooked the rich and ancient rock art traditions of the Aboriginal people, the original inhabitants of the land. Some of the weathering on the sandstone might be from genuine indigenous carvings, which were then added to or misinterpreted by later visitors. This serves as a reminder to approach such sites with respect for all cultures involved, not just the one we find most exotic or exciting. Ultimately, the Gosford Glyphs are a powerful cautionary tale. They teach us that the most thrilling explanation is not always the correct one, and that in the quest for lost history, the most valuable tools we have are not speculation and desire, but patience, context, and a healthy, informed skepticism. Beneath the crystal-clear, turquoise waters off the southern coast of Japan's Yonaguni Island lies a site that seems to defy both nature and history. From the surface, it's an unremarkable patch of ocean, but diving down just a few meters reveals a breathtaking spectacle, massive, monolithic sandstone formations that look like the ruins of a sunken city. We see what appear to be vast, flat terraces connected by sheer, vertical walls that drop down to the seafloor. There are perfectly straight, 90-degree corners, sharp-edged staircases rising and descending between levels, and geometric shapes that look like carved pillars and wide plazas. The entire complex, now known as the Yonaguni Monument, covers an area the size of a stadium and is the center of a fierce, decades-long debate that asks a fundamental question. Are we looking at the handiwork of Mother Nature, or are these the drowned ruins of a civilization so ancient it was lost to the rising seas at the end of the last ice age? The discovery of this underwater marvel was as accidental as it was dramatic. In 1986, a local dive tour operator named Sacsayhuamán Walls was searching for new spots to show his clients, hoping to find a reliable area to view hammerhead sharks. As he scanned the seabed, his search for wildlife was interrupted by something far more staggering: the sheer, artificial-looking cliffs and platforms of the Maine Monument. He had stumbled upon what looked like a submerged, stepped pyramid. The news of his find quickly spread, attracting the attention of geologists and archaeologists from around the world, all eager to solve the riddle of Yonaguni. The most prominent early investigator was the late Professor Masaki Kimura, a marine geologist from the University of the Ryukyus, who spent over 2 decades studying the site. After countless dives, he became the leading voice arguing that the structures are unequivocally man-made. He points to specific features that he argues could not be formed by natural processes alone: 2 closely spaced, cylindrical holes in a rock that look like they were made for a pivot, a relief carving that resembles a crude animal figure, and a large, looping channel that looks like it was designed for water flow. For Kimura and his supporters, this was not a natural rock formation. It was a ceremonial complex, a kind of sunken Göbekli Tepe that was submerged when the polar ice caps melted at the end of the last glacial period, over 10,000 years ago. If Professor Kimura's interpretation is correct, the implications are nothing less than revolutionary. It would mean that a sophisticated society, capable of large-scale, precision stonework, existed in Japan during the Paleolithic era, a time when our ancestors were still thought to be simple hunter-gatherers. This would push back the timeline of complex monumental architecture in Japan by thousands of years, predating even the earliest known Jomon period pottery. Furthermore, the site's location, now 15 to 25 meters underwater, serves as a dramatic testament to a world that no longer exists. 10,000 years ago, during the last glacial maximum, sea levels were over 120 meters lower than they are today. What is now the ocean floor around Yonaguni would have been dry land, a coastal plain that could have easily supported human habitation. The monument, if man-made, would have been constructed on this plain, only to be slowly swallowed by the rising oceans as the world warmed. In this view, Yonaguni isn't just a ruin, it's a frozen moment in a cataclysmic climate event, a ghost of a lost world that was literally erased from the map by melting ice. However, the scientific mainstream offers a powerful and compelling counter-argument, one rooted in the incredible, often underestimated power of natural geology. The leading voice of skepticism belongs to Robert Schoch, a geologist from Boston University who famously dubbed the site. Schoch acknowledges that the formations are visually stunning and eerily artificial looking, but he attributes this to the region's unique natural processes. The rock that makes up the monument is sandstone, specifically a type that is naturally fractured along parallel planes and right angles due to its tectonic history. These natural joints and bedding planes are the perfect recipe for creating blocks that look carved. The strong underwater currents that sweep through the area act like a master sculptor, relentlessly eroding the softer rock along these pre-existing lines of weakness. This process, known as differential erosion, can produce astonishingly regular shapes, flat platforms, straight walls, and sharp corners, all without any human intervention. Schoch agrees that some of the features, like the so-called carved loops, may have been slightly modified by human hands in a more recent era, but he sees the overall structure as fundamentally natural. He argues that we are victims of a psychological phenomenon called pareidolia, our brain's hardwired tendency to see familiar patterns, especially faces and structures, in random natural shapes. We see a staircase because our brains are conditioned to recognize human construction, not because one was ever actually built there. This clash between the natural and anthropogenic theories turns Yonaguni into a fascinating philosophical battleground. It forces us to confront the limits of our own perception and the standards of proof we require to rewrite history. For every feature that looks man-made, a geologist can often point to a natural analog found elsewhere in the world. The stairs could be terracing caused by the shearing off of rock layers. The carved animal could be a random pattern of erosion and encrusting marine life. The perfect 90-degree angles are a hallmark of the rock's natural jointing system. The burden of proof, skeptics argue, rests on those claiming human origin, and that proof must be undeniable. The discovery of a tool, a piece of pottery, or a clearly artificial artifact within the undisturbed layers of the monument itself. So far, despite Professor Kimura's claims, no such smoking gun has been universally accepted by the broader scientific community. The enduring mystery of the Yonaguni Monument is its greatest gift. It doesn't provide easy answers, but it asks profound questions. It challenges us to keep an open mind about the capabilities of our ancient ancestors, while also respecting the immense sculptural power of natural forces. Whether an ancient temple complex or a masterpiece of geological serendipity, it stands as a humbling reminder of how much of our own planet's history is still hidden beneath the waves, waiting to be explored. It invites us to consider the fragile relationship between humanity and a changing climate, showing us a world that was lost not to war or famine, but to the inexorable rising tide. While the Yonaguni Monument presents a physical puzzle of stone and sea, our next artifact is a mystery made of words and whispers, a document that exists more in the realm of story than substance. We now turn to the Tulli Papyrus, a text that has become a legendary piece of evidence for those who believe in ancient extraterrestrial visitations, yet one that is shrouded in so much doubt and dispute that many scholars question if it ever existed at all. The story, as it's often told, is incredibly compelling. Purportedly, it was an ancient Egyptian document that recorded a breathtaking celestial event during the reign of the powerful pharaoh Thutmose III, around the year 1483 BCE. The text, as translated and popularized by various authors, describes circles of fire appearing in the sky, moving in a disordered pattern and shining brighter than the sun. These objects, it is said, eventually ascended higher and vanished toward the south. For ancient astronaut theorists, this isn't a poetic description of a meteor shower or a comet. It is a clear, unambiguous report of a UFO sighting, a fleet of otherworldly vehicles observed and documented by the meticulous scribes of Egypt. It seems to provide a direct link between the wonders of the ancient world and the modern phenomenon of unidentified flying objects, suggesting that the phenomenon is not new but has been with us for millennia. The allure of this narrative is undeniable. It taps into a deep desire to find validation for modern beliefs in the ancient record, to see our current mysteries reflected in the past. If true, the Tulli Papyrus would be a staggering piece of historical evidence, a first-hand account that could potentially reshape our understanding of human history and our place in the cosmos. It's a story that feels too specific, too detailed to be purely mythological. The mention of the objects moving erratically and then departing in a specific direction gives it the feel of a genuine observational report, something that sets it apart from more symbolic or religious texts. This apparent authenticity has made it a cornerstone of many books and documentaries dedicated to the idea that extraterrestrials have been interacting with humanity since its earliest days. However, when we attempt to trace the origins of the Tulli Papyrus, the solid ground of evidence quickly turns into shifting sand. The first and most enormous red flag is that no one has actually seen this papyrus in modern times. There are no photographs of it, no fragments reside in a museum, and no archaeological excavation ever documented its discovery. The entire story hinges on a copy of a supposed translation. The most commonly cited origin story claims that the original papyrus was found by an Italian Egyptologist named Alberto Tulli sometime in the 1930s. According to the tale, Tulli found it in a Cairo antique shop but couldn't afford to buy it, so he made a handwritten copy of the hieratic text. This copy was then allegedly translated by various people over the years, each adding their own layer of interpretation. The version we have today is several steps removed from any original source, and the chain of custody is hopelessly broken and unverifiable. This complete lack of a physical artifact is, for any historian, an insurmountable problem. In the world of scholarship, and text without provenance is essentially a ghost. It cannot be tested, dated, or authenticated. Linguistic analysis of the available translations further deepens the skepticism. Egyptologists who have examined the text point out that the language used doesn't match the style or grammar of authentic 18th dynasty documents. The phrasing feels off, anachronistic, as if someone with a basic knowledge of Egyptian history was trying to imitate an ancient text but didn't have the deep linguistic expertise to get it quite right. The most likely explanation, supported by most mainstream historians, is that the Tulli Papyrus is a 20th century fabrication. It could have been a hoax created for fame or profit, or perhaps it began as a misinterpretation of a genuine astronomical text that was then embellished and altered through repeated, flawed translations. It exemplifies a critical lesson in historical research: the need for rigorous source criticism. This is the process of questioning a document's origin, its purpose, its author, and its transmission over time. A story without a verifiable source is just a story, no matter how compelling it may be. The enduring fascination with the Tulli Papyrus, despite its dubious nature, reveals something profound about our relationship with the past. We are pattern-seeking creatures, desperate to find connections and meaning. The papyrus represents a desire to project our contemporary fascination with UFOs onto the canvas of history, to believe that our ancestors witnessed the same inexplicable phenomena we report today. It serves as a powerful cautionary tale, reminding us that the passionate pursuit of mystery must always be tempered by a disciplined demand for evidence. The real lesson of the Tulli Papyrus isn't about ancient Egyptians seeing spaceships. It's about our own modern hunger for wonder, and how that hunger can sometimes lead us to embrace a compelling fiction in the absence of a more complex and perhaps more ordinary truth. But long before the rise of the Inca, on the most isolated inhabited island on Earth, another culture was engaged in a stoneworking project of equally bewildering ambition. Imagine standing on the grassy slopes of an extinct volcano, staring into the hollow eyes of a stone giant. This colossal head, 30 feet tall and weighing more than 80 tons, is not alone. It is one of nearly 1,000 such statues, known as moai, that stand guard along the coastline of Easter Island, or as its people call it, Rapa Nui. For centuries, these silent sentinels have been a symbol of ultimate mystery. How could a small, isolated society of never more than 15,000 people, with no metal tools, no wheels, and no large animals to provide draft power, have possibly quarried, carved, and transported these monumental figures across miles of rugged terrain? The scale of their achievement is so immense that it has, for generations, inspired theories that reach for explanations beyond human capability. The process began at the volcanic quarry of Rono Roroku, a landscape that looks as if a race of giants was interrupted mid-task. Here, the Rapa Nui master carvers used hard, dense basalt stone tools called toki to patiently chip away at the soft volcanic tuff of the mountain slope. They would carve the moai directly into the rock face, first shaping the front and sides, and then painstakingly undercutting the back until the statue was attached by only a thin spine of stone. Once this keel was finally broken, the statue would slide down the slope to be finished in a pit at the quarry's base, where the intricate details on its back and the empty sockets for its eyes were added. The largest of these figures, had it been completed, would have stood a staggering 70 feet tall and weighed close to 300 tons. The quarry itself is a haunting place, filled with statues in every stage of completion, creating a surreal snapshot of an industry that simply stopped one day, leaving its workers frozen in time. But the true, heart-stopping feat of engineering was not the carving, it was the transportation. How did they move these multi-ton monoliths from the quarry to their final ceremonial platforms, known as ahu, often over 10 miles of uneven, hilly ground? This is the question that has fueled the wildest speculation. The most famous theory, popularized by researcher Thor Heyerdahl, involved the use of vast amounts of timber to roll the statues on logs. But this idea has fallen out of favor, partly because it doesn't adequately explain how the statues could have been controlled on steep descents without crashing, and partly because evidence suggests the island's deforestation happened after the statue-building era had already peaked. Other, more fringe theories have proposed that the Rapa Nui possessed a now-lost technology, perhaps even aided by extraterrestrial visitors, to levitate or teleport the massive stones. The most compelling and elegant answer, however, has come from a combination of modern experimentation and a re-evaluation of local oral history. Archaeologists Terry Hunt and Carl Lipo proposed a method so simple it seems almost absurd: they walked. Their theory, supported by successful experiments with concrete replicas, suggests that the moai were transported in an upright position. Teams of rope pullers would rock the statue from side to side, edging it forward with each rhythmic sway. Think of it like moving a heavy refrigerator by tilting it from one corner to the other. With a coordinated effort, a surprisingly small group of people can maneuver an incredibly heavy object. This walking theory is supported by the oral traditions of the Rapa Nui people themselves, who had long stated that the statues walked to their ahu. What was once dismissed as myth is now considered a literal description of their ingenious technique. The broken moai found along ancient roads are not evidence of a catastrophic collapse of society, but rather of apprentices learning a difficult skill. Sometimes the statue fell, and it was too heavy to right again. The true wonder of the moai, therefore, is not found in fantasies of alien help or lost super sciences, but in the breathtaking demonstration of what a determined, tightly knit human community can achieve. The Rapa Nui did not need external help. They possessed an intimate understanding of their environment, incredible social organization, and generations of accumulated engineering knowledge passed down through practice and story. Their achievement forces us to shed our own cultural biases that equate technological complexity with intelligence. They didn't have the wheel or the pulley, but they had something far more powerful: a shared purpose, ingenious problem-solving, and the raw human power of collective effort. The moai stand today not as a warning of ecological collapse, though that is part of the island's later story, but as a permanent monument to human ingenuity. They remind us that when a community is united by a common vision, there is almost no limit to the mountains they can move, or the stone giants they can make walk across the land. High in the Andes, overlooking the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, lies a fortress that defies not just invaders, but the very logic of human construction. This is Sacsayhuamán, and its walls are a breathtaking spectacle of stone. We are not looking at simple bricks and mortar. These are monumental boulders, some weighing more than 300 tons, the equivalent of 200 family cars, fitted together in a dizzying, three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle. The stones are polygonal, meaning they have multiple angles and sides, and they are locked together with a precision that seems to belong to the Machine Age, not the Bronze Age. The joints between them are so impossibly tight that you cannot slide a piece of paper or even a razor blade between the seams. This isn't just stacking. This is a form of masonry so advanced that it looks less like construction and more like a form of magic, as if the builders could command the solid rock to soften and flow together like clay before turning back to stone. This mind-bending perfection has, understandably, fueled theories that stretch far beyond the conventional narrative of the Inca Empire. How could a culture that lacked iron tools, the wheel, or even a written system of blueprints achieve such flawless, seamless joins between irregular, gargantuan blocks? For some, the answer lies in a lost technology, a secret knowledge possessed by the Inca or a much older civilization that preceded them. Perhaps they had access to a plant-based solvent, a mysterious liquid that could temporarily soften stone, allowing them to mold it like putty and achieve those perfect plastic-like fits. Others, looking at the sheer weight and precision of the blocks, have proposed even more radical ideas, suggesting the use of sonic levitation or acoustic technology to make the massive stones weightless, guiding them effortlessly into place with sound waves, a concept that leans into the realm of anti-gravity. These ideas, while sensational, speak to a genuine sense of awe and bewilderment. When faced with something that appears technologically impossible for its time, the human mind naturally reaches for extraordinary explanations. Mainstream archaeology, however, offers a different kind of wonder, one rooted not in lost super science, but in the immense power of human ingenuity, patience, and generational knowledge. The widely accepted explanation is a process of meticulous trial and error, a testament to the Incas' profound understanding of their material and their unparalleled skill as stonemasons. The process likely began at the quarry, where workers would use harder stones to pound the granite along natural fracture lines, gradually shaping a block. Then came the true masterpiece of effort, the fitting. The common belief is that a technique called scribed fitting was used. A newly shaped block would be moved, likely using log rollers, earthen ramps, and the brute force of hundreds of men pulling on ropes next to its intended neighbor in the wall. The masons would then take a smaller, harder rock and use it to pound the outline of the lower stone onto the face of the new one. They would then painstakingly chip away at that exact impression, lower the block slightly, check the fit, and repeat the process. This cycle of pounding, checking, and adjusting would have been repeated countless times for each individual stone, a process that could take months for a single block. The result of this unimaginable patience is what we see today, a perfect, custom-fit join that transfers seismic energy throughout the entire structure, making it incredibly resistant to the earthquakes that frequently shake the Andes. The walls of Sacsayhuamán aren't just precise, they are brilliantly engineered for their environment. This clash of interpretations makes Sacsayhuamán more than just an ancient ruin. It is a physical embodiment of a deeper philosophical debate about how we view the past. Do we see ancient peoples as fundamentally like us, capable of staggering achievements with simple tools and sheer determination? Or do we see them as beneficiaries of a lost golden age, a higher knowledge that was somehow wiped out? The walls challenge our modern arrogance, our tendency to equate technological complexity with intelligence. The Inca did not need lasers or anti-gravity. They had an intimate, hands-on mastery of stone, a deep cultural willingness to invest generations in a single project, and a sophisticated understanding of seismic engineering that we are only now fully appreciating. The true secret of Sacsayhuamán may not be a mysterious plant or a sonic device, but the power of accumulated tradition, the slow, careful transfer of skill from one master mason to the next over countless generations. It stands as a humbling reminder that a society's greatness is not always measured by the complexity of its machines, but by the depth of its knowledge and the scale of its collective will. Now let's travel to the sacred temple of Seti I at Abydos, a site revered for its beautifully preserved and intricate hieroglyphic inscriptions. Here, high on a ceiling beam within the temple's hypostyle hall, is a small cluster of carvings that has launched 1,000 theories and become an internet sensation. To the modern eye, it looks unmistakably like a snapshot of contemporary technology etched in stone. One symbol bears a striking resemblance to a helicopter, complete with a main rotor blade and a tail rotor. Right next to it, another looks like a submarine or perhaps a zeppelin, and a third brings to mind a futuristic hovercraft or even a tank. The immediate, jaw-dropping conclusion is almost irresistible. Did the ancient Egyptians have a vision of future machinery, or is this concrete proof of time travel or extraterrestrial contact? It's a visual puzzle that seems to scream of anachronism, a glitch in the matrix of history. This captivating interpretation taps directly into our deepest fascinations with the unknown. The images are so clear, so recognizable, that it feels impossible to dismiss them as coincidence. For proponents of alternative history, the Abydos helicopter is a smoking gun, irrefutable evidence that advanced knowledge existed in the distant past. The theories built around it are as imaginative as they are far-reaching. Some suggest that the carvings are literal representations of vehicles used by a highly advanced, now lost civilization like Atlantis, whose technology was witnessed and recorded by the Egyptians. Others propose that they are evidence of time travelers who visited ancient Egypt, leaving behind impressions that were dutifully carved into the temple walls. The most popular theory within the ancient astronaut community is that these are depictions of extraterrestrial spacecraft observed by the Egyptians and incorporated into their sacred art, a permanent record of otherworldly visitors. The power of these images lies in their immediate visual impact. They require no translation or expert knowledge to recognize, making the mystery accessible and thrilling to everyone. However, Egyptology provides a far more grounded, yet intellectually fascinating, explanation for these bizarre images. The phenomenon is not one of prophecy or alien contact, but of practical archaeology and the passage of time. The key to the mystery is a common practice in ancient Egyptian monument building known as a palimpsest. A palimpsest is a surface, whether it's parchment or stone, that has been reused, with the original writing or carving erased and new material inscribed over it. In the case of the Abydos temple, the ceiling beam in question was not originally dedicated to Seti I. It is believed to have been part of an earlier structure, possibly from the reign of his father, Rameses I. When Seti commissioned his temple, the artisans were likely instructed to recarve the older inscriptions to honor the new pharaoh. This involved plastering over the original hieroglyphs and carving a new set of symbols into the fresh plaster. Over millennia, the plaster has fallen away in patches, and the stone beneath has been exposed. What we are seeing is not a single, coherent image, but a chaotic overlap of two separate sets of hieroglyphs from different time periods carved on top of one another. The famous helicopter is not a depiction of an aircraft. It is the accidental, ghostly fusion of parts of several different symbols. The rotor might be the wing and head of a bird hieroglyph from the lower layer, while the body is the rounded base of a cartouche from the upper layer. The submarine is likely a similar amalgamation, perhaps the bottom of a staff or scepter combined with the curves of a serpent or a water glyph. It is a visual accident, a product of erosion and coincidence. This explanation transforms the Abydos carvings from a historical anomaly into a powerful lesson in human psychology. They are a textbook example of pareidolia, the innate human tendency to perceive familiar patterns, especially faces and objects, in random or ambiguous stimuli. We see a helicopter not because it was carved, but because our brains are hardwired to find meaning in chaos, to impose order on disorder. This same cognitive process is why we see shapes in clouds or the face of a man in the moon. The Abydos helicopter is a Rorschach test etched in stone, revealing more about our own modern minds and our desire to find connections than it does about ancient Egyptian technology. It also highlights the critical importance of context in archaeology. An image isolated in a photograph on the internet can tell a wildly misleading story. To understand it, we must examine its physical context, its location in the temple, the materials used, the styles of carving around it, and the historical practices of the culture that created it. When viewed in its full context, the mystery evaporates, replaced by a clear and logical sequence of events. The true significance of the Abydos helicopter, therefore, is not as evidence of ancient astronauts, but as a cautionary tale for how we interpret the past. It reminds us that our first impressions, no matter how compelling, can be deceiving. It teaches us the value of skepticism and the necessity of consulting expert knowledge before jumping to extraordinary conclusions. The real wonder is not that the Egyptians carved a helicopter, but that through a simple quirk of geology and human renovation, they created an accidental Rorschach test that continues to captivate and challenge us thousands of years later, proving that sometimes the most intriguing mysteries are not hidden messages from the past, but reflections of our own boundless imagination. But while the Abydos carvings are a fascinating case of pareidolia and overlapping history, our next set of artifacts presents a different kind of visual puzzle, one not born from erosion, but from the deliberate, exquisite craftsmanship of a pre-Columbian culture. In the highlands of Colombia, the Quimbaya civilization, which flourished between around 300 BCE and 600 CE, left behind a stunning legacy of gold work. Among their vast collection of funerary objects, jewelry, and ceremonial items are a small number of peculiar, stylized figures that have ignited a fierce and enduring debate. To the modern eye, these objects look uncannily like modern aircraft. They feature a main fuselage delta wing-like structures and a vertical tail fin that looks precisely like an empennage designed for stability in flight. The resemblance is so striking that it has led to a compelling and controversial theory that the Quimbaya people possessed, or at least had knowledge of, the principles of aviation over 1,000 years ago. This interpretation gained significant traction in the 1990s when several German aeronautical engineers and hobbyists took a keen interest in the artifacts. They constructed enlarged, precise-scale models of the so-called Quimbaya airplanes, and to the astonishment of many, these models didn't just look the part, they flew. When launched by hand, the models exhibited stable gliding capabilities, and when fitted with small motors and propellers, some were even capable of powered flight. This tangible, physical demonstration seemed to lend powerful credibility to the idea that the objects were not merely decorative, but functional models of flying machines. The theories that emerged from this were as dramatic as they were divisive. Some suggested the Quimbaya must have witnessed actual aircraft, perhaps from a lost advanced civilization or even extraterrestrial visitors, and were attempting to replicate what they had seen. Others proposed a more radical idea, that this culture had independently discovered the secrets of aerodynamics and had developed working gliders or even primitive engines, knowledge that was later lost to time. However, the mainstream archaeological and anthropological perspective offers a far more culturally grounded explanation, one that requires us to step back from our modern, technology-saturated worldview. The vast majority of scholars identify these objects as highly stylized representations of animals, most likely insects, birds, or even amphibians like frogs or stingrays. The Quimbaya artists were not concerned with photographic realism. They were masters of abstraction and symbolism, often creating art that emphasized certain features for ritual or aesthetic purposes. The wings of these objects closely resemble the folded wing cases of beetles or the streamlined bodies of certain fish. The cockpit or main body could easily be interpreted as the thorax of an insect, while the tail fin is a common feature in depictions of birds or even the tail of a lizard. These artifacts were found in burial contexts, often alongside more clearly recognizable animal figures, suggesting they belong to the same zoomorphic tradition, a tradition of representing the natural world in a stylized, spiritualized form. This stark divide in interpretation makes the Quimbaya artifacts a perfect case study in the subjective nature of seeing. It highlights a critical concept in archaeology known as the psychology of the beholder. We view the past through the lens of our own experiences and knowledge. Living in the age of aviation, our brains are primed to recognize shapes that resemble airplanes. This is a classic example of pareidolia, the same phenomenon that allows us to see faces in clouds or animals in rock formations. The danger, as scholars point out, is in projecting our own technological framework onto a culture that operated within a completely different symbolic and spiritual framework. To insist that these are airplanes is to risk reducing the rich, complex world of Quimbaya art and religion to a simple, anachronistic echo of our own society. It dismisses their unique creativity and forces their work into a box labeled by 20th century innovation. The true lesson of the Quimbaya artifacts is not about ancient aerospace engineers, but about the profound responsibility we have when interpreting the past. They serve as a powerful reminder to approach ancient art with humility and a deep respect for its original cultural context. These objects were not created for a museum display to be analyzed by engineers. They were sacred items, likely imbued with spiritual meaning connected to the animals they represented, creatures that symbolized transformation, fertility, or a connection to the spirit world. Their beauty and intrigue lie not in what they might mistakenly resemble today, but in what they genuinely were, magnificent expressions of a sophisticated culture's view of the natural world and their place within it. They challenge us to appreciate ancient ingenuity on its own terms, to see the world through the eyes of the people who made them, and to resist the tempting but ultimately reductive impulse to find ourselves in everything they left behind. High on the arid Bolivian Altiplano, at a breathless altitude of over 12,000 feet, lie the ruins of a site that doesn't just challenge our assumptions about ancient technology, it seems to openly mock them. This is Pumapunku, part of the larger Tiwanaku complex, and to walk among its scattered stones is to feel a profound and disorienting sense of awe. You are not looking at simple, weathered blocks. You are looking at the mangled wreckage of what appears to be a precision-engineered stone factory, shattered by some unimaginable cataclysm. The sheer scale of destruction is the first clue that something extraordinary happened here. These are not ruins that gently succumb to the ravages of time. They look as if they were exploded from within, with multi-ton slabs of stone tossed around like a child's wooden blocks by a petulant giant. But the true mystery isn't the destruction, it's the mind-bending precision of the pieces that remain. The material itself is the first hurdle for our understanding. The builders of Pumapunku chose andesite, an igneous rock with a hardness just below that of diamond. Working this stone with primitive tools would be like trying to carve a sculpture out of a car engine block using only a hammer and a piece of glass. Yet the surfaces we see are not rough-hewn. They are flawlessly smooth with a near-optical finish that feels like polished ceramic. They achieved this perfection not on simple, flat planes, but on the most complex, geometrically precise shapes imaginable. We see blocks with perfectly straight, razor-sharp edges that run for meters without the slightest deviation. We see H-blocks with a series of identical, recessed niches cut into them, each one a perfect negative space. Most famously, we see stones with a series of precision-cut notches and tabs, a sophisticated system of interlocking joins that looks less like ancient masonry and more like the work of a master cabinetmaker or a modern aerospace engineer using a computer-controlled milling machine. The consistency is staggering. These are not one-off anomalies. Dozens of these identical, complexly shaped blocks are scattered across the site, implying a process of mass production that is utterly alien to our concept of prehistoric construction. Faced with this level of inexplicable precision, it is almost a natural human reaction to reach for extraordinary explanations. The most popular theory among alternative historians is that the builders of Pumapunku possessed advanced machining technology far beyond simple stone hammers and copper chisels. Proponents of this view point to the microscopic analysis of the cut marks, which some claim show evidence of saws with diamond-tipped blades or even tube drills that could cut through solid andesite with ease. They argue that the geometric perfection and the repetitive, identical nature of the complex joints suggest the use of prefabrication and a standardized unit of measurement, concepts that feel deeply anachronistic for a culture dating from over 1,000 years ago. This line of thinking inevitably leads to even more radical ideas, that this knowledge was not homegrown, but was provided by an outside source, perhaps a lost advanced civilization like Atlantis, or even visitors from another world who shared their technology with the indigenous people. The sheer otherworldly feel of the ruins, set against the stark, high-altitude landscape, makes these theories feel strangely plausible to the imagination. Mainstream archaeology, however, tells a different story, one that is less about lost technology and more about the breathtaking power of accumulated human skill, patience, and ingenuity. Researchers attribute the construction to the Tiwanaku culture, which thrived in the region from around 500 to 1000 AD. Their explanation rejects the need for lasers or alien blueprints, instead pointing to tools and methods that were well within the known capabilities of Andean civilizations. Primary tools, they argue, were simple stone hammers made from even harder rocks like quartzite. Using a technique called pecking, a worker would literally pound the andesite surface thousands of times with a hammerstone, gradually pulverizing the rock grain by grain. After creating a rough shape through pecking, they would then switch to abrasives. Using sand, water, and a piece of leather or a flat stone, they would patiently grind and polish the surface for countless hours, perhaps even generations for a single large block, to achieve that famous mirror-like finish. The complex geometric shapes, including the infamous interlocking tabs, could have been created using simple guides and templates made of wood or stone, and a lot of trial and error. A mason might use a cord dipped in pigment to snap straight lines, and carved stone templates to ensure each notch was identical to the last. The process would have been agonizingly slow, a monumental investment of time and labor. This is where the real, profound mystery of Pumapunku truly lies. It's not necessarily how they did it, but why they did it with such obsessive, seemingly unnecessary precision. Why would a culture devote what must have been centuries of communal effort to create blocks that fit together with a perfection that seems to defy any practical requirement? The mainstream answer points to a deep, culturally embedded drive for excellence and a profound spiritual purpose. Pumapunku was not a fortress or a palace. It was most likely a grand ceremonial center, a place believed to be the very site of creation in Tiwanaku mythology. In such a context, the construction was not merely an engineering project. It was a form of worship, a devotional act. The flawless joining of stones without mortar might have held a deep symbolic meaning, representing a perfect, unbreakable connection to the gods and the cosmos. The incredible effort required was not a burden, but an offering. The site, therefore, challenges our modern, utilitarian mindset. We look for efficiency and practicality, but the Tiwanaku people might have been pursuing perfection for its own spiritual and aesthetic value, a testament to their belief system where the act of creation was as sacred as the finished temple itself. Pumapunku stands as a humbling lesson that the past cannot always be measured by our own standards of logic and efficiency. Sometimes the greatest mysteries are not about lost tools, but about lost motivations. The powerful, invisible forces of faith and tradition that can move mountains and shape stone with a precision that still baffles the world. Nestled deep within the remote and rugged mountains of Qinghai Province in China, near the top of Mount Baigong, lies a discovery that seems ripped from the pages of a science fiction novel. Here, on the shores of a pristine alpine lake, and inside a cave that looks out over the stark landscape, strange tubular structures protrude from the rock. These are the Baigong Pipes, and they present a visual riddle that is as compelling as it is controversial. The pipes are made of iron, and they are not simply lying on the ground. They are firmly embedded within solid sedimentary rock that geologists estimate to be millions of years old. Their appearance is undeniably artificial. Some are perfectly cylindrical, while others have collapsed into rusty, jagged fragments. They vary in size, with the largest measuring over 16 inches in diameter, and they run horizontally through the cliff face and even plunge deep into the earth below the lake. To those who first documented them, the immediate and shocking conclusion was that they were the remnants of a vast, ancient plumbing or industrial system, a network of conduits that simply should not exist in rock of such immense antiquity. The implications of this interpretation are, of course, staggering. If these iron pipes were manufactured and installed by an intelligent species millions of years ago, it would completely upend our understanding of life on Earth. It would suggest the existence of a technologically advanced civilization that rose and fell in a distant epoch long before humans ever walked the planet, a concept that fundamentally challenges the entire timeline of evolution and human history. This has led to the most sensational theory of all, that the pipes are not the work of a lost human culture, but of extraterrestrial visitors. Proponents of this idea suggest that the remote mountaintop location would have made an ideal base, with the pipes serving as part of a complex facility for energy, water, or waste management, later abandoned and slowly fossilized over eons. The very isolation of the site adds to its otherworldly aura, feeling like a place where anything, even the impossible, could be true. However, when geologists and other scientists turned their analytical tools to the Baigong Pipes, a far more mundane, yet no less fascinating, explanation began to emerge. Their primary argument is that these structures are not pipes at all, but a spectacular example of a natural phenomenon known as a fulgurate, or more commonly in this context, dendritic iron concretions. The process begins with tree roots. Millions of years ago, this area was likely a forest. When trees died and their roots decayed, they left behind long, hollow tubes in the sediment, perfect cylindrical molds of the organic material that was once there. Over immense periods of time, iron-rich water percolated through the surrounding sandstone. This water would have deposited its dissolved iron minerals into these empty root casts, essentially creating a perfect iron cast of the long-vanished root system. As the surrounding sandstone continued to harden into rock, these iron-filled tubes became permanent features. The varying sizes and angles of the pipes simply reflect the natural, branching architecture of the original root networks. What we are seeing is not an ancient factory, but a beautiful and intricate fossil, a literal petrified snapshot of a prehistoric ecosystem. Further scientific analysis strongly supports this natural origin. Studies of the pipes have shown they contain not just iron, but also a significant amount of silicon dioxide and calcium oxide materials consistent with the surrounding sandstone, not with refined industrial metal. There are also no telltale signs of human or alien craftsmanship. The surfaces lack tool marks, the diameters are inconsistent in a way that suggests organic growth rather than manufactured standards, and there is a complete absence of any other associated artifacts like tools, fittings, or slag that would be expected at an industrial site. The most likely explanation for the more recent-looking debris found near the cave is simply modern human activity. The area is remote but not completely untouched, and discarded industrial waste from past centuries could have easily been mistaken for part of the ancient formation. The true importance of the Baigong Pipes, therefore, lies not in proving the existence of ancient astronauts, but in the powerful lesson they offer about perception and the scientific process. They are a masterclass in a cognitive bias known as apophenia, the human tendency to perceive patterns and connections in random or meaningless data. Our brains are hardwired to see design and intention, especially when presented with straight lines and cylindrical shapes, because for our entire history, those shapes have almost always meant something was made by a thinking being. The Baigong Pipes trigger that instinct powerfully. They stand as a permanent monument to the critical difference between something that looks artificial and something that is artificial. This case highlights the indispensable role of rigorous scientific analysis in separating extraordinary claims from ordinary, yet incredible, natural wonders. It reminds us that nature itself is the most masterful sculptor and engineer, capable of producing formations of breathtaking complexity and regularity that can easily fool the untrained eye. The pipes do not point to a forgotten chapter of industrial history, but to a forgotten forest, and their real story is one of geological transformation, a slow, patient alchemy that turned decaying wood into seemingly impossible iron structures, proving that sometimes the truth is just as wondrous as any fiction we could imagine. Just when we thought we had the entire story of human progress neatly mapped out, a slow, steady climb from simple hunter-gatherers to settled farmers, and then to complex civilization, a discovery in southeastern Turkey emerged to shatter that timeline completely. Nestled on a wind-swept hill known as Göbekli Tepe, which translates to Potbelly Hill, are the remains of what might be the world's oldest and most daring architectural project. This is not a simple village or a primitive campsite. We are looking at a series of at least 20 circular enclosures, each defined by massive, T-shaped limestone pillars arranged in rings. The truly staggering part is their age. Through careful radiocarbon dating of organic material found at the site, archaeologists have determined that these structures were erected around 9,000 years before the Common Era. To put that in perspective, Göbekli Tepe is over 6,000 years older than Stonehenge, and a full 7,000 years older than the Great Pyramid of Giza. It was built a millennia before the invention of writing, the wheel, or metal tools, and most astonishingly, it predates the widespread adoption of agriculture. This single site forces us to tear up the textbook narrative of history and ask a revolutionary question: what if monumentality, not farming, was the spark that ignited civilization? The sheer scale of the undertaking is what first defies belief. The largest of these pillars stand over 18 feet tall and weigh between 40 and 60 tons. They were quarried from nearby bedrock using nothing more than stone tools, then transported, shaped, and erected by a people we have always classified as simple hunter-gatherers. This label now feels utterly inadequate. The organization required for such a feat is mind-boggling. It suggests a level of social coordination, planning, and division of labor that historians never thought possible for a pre-agrarian society. Who was the architect who coordinated the hundreds of people needed to extract and move these monoliths? How were they fed and housed during the construction? This was not a small family project. It was a grand communal endeavor that would have required a sophisticated command structure and a shared, powerful motivation that unified different bands of people across the region. Göbekli Tepe proves that hunter-gatherers were capable of much more than just day-to-day survival. They could conceive of and execute projects on a colossal scale, rewriting our understanding of their social complexity and ambition. But the mystery deepens when we look closer at the pillars themselves. They are not blank monoliths, they are covered in a breathtaking menagerie of carved reliefs. We see a world of dangerous and powerful animals: foxes, snakes, wild boars, scorpions, lions, and vultures, all rendered with skill and artistry. These are not the docile, domesticated creatures that would later appear in farmer societies. These are the wild, untamed beasts of the hunter's world, carved with a palpable sense of respect and perhaps fear. Many of the central T-shaped pillars feature carved arms and hands, suggesting they are stylized representations of humanoid figures, perhaps ancestors, gods, or powerful spirits watching over the enclosures. The purpose of this place seems overwhelmingly symbolic and ritualistic. This was not a settlement. Very few domestic tools or evidence of daily habitation have been found. Instead, it appears to have been a regional cult center, a sacred destination where nomadic groups would gather at specific times for shared ceremonies. This purpose leads us to the most profound implication of Göbekli Tepe. For decades, the accepted theory of civilization, often called the Neolithic Revolution, stated that it was the invention of agriculture that changed everything. The story went that once humans learned to farm, they could settle down in permanent villages. This surplus of food allowed for specialization. Some people could become priests, artists, and leaders, which in turn led to the development of religion, complex society, and monumental architecture. Göbekli Tepe turns this sequence completely on its head. Here we have the world's most monumental architecture and evidence of complex symbolic thought and organized religion, but it appears before agriculture. This suggests a startling new possibility. Perhaps it was the need to build and maintain such a sacred place that actually drove the invention of farming. Feeding the large groups of people who gathered here for rituals would have placed an enormous strain on the local environment. The most logical way to provide a predictable and sufficient food supply for these seasonal congregations would have been to start cultivating wild grains and managing wild animals. In this light, Göbekli Tepe isn't just a temple. It might be the very catalyst that launched humanity toward agriculture and settled life. The temple came first and the farm followed. The site's eventual abandonment adds another layer of intrigue. Around 8000 BCE, the entire complex was deliberately and carefully buried under a small mountain of soil and debris, preserving it perfectly for millennia. Why would a people who invested so much collective effort into this sacred place choose to bury it? We may never know for certain. One compelling theory is that the very worldview that built Göbekli Tepe was becoming obsolete. The site is covered with carvings of a dangerous, wild world, a perspective born from a life of hunting and gathering. As the people who used it began to master agriculture and domesticate animals, their relationship with the natural world fundamentally changed. The wild beasts depicted on the pillars were no longer the central figures in their spiritual universe. The old gods of the hunt were being replaced by new gods of the field and the harvest. Burying the temple might have been a way to honor the old ways while making way for the new, a symbolic closing of one chapter of human history as another began. Göbekli Tepe, therefore, stands as a silent, monumental bridge between two worlds, the world of the hunter and the world of the farmer. It forces us to humbly acknowledge that the path of human progress was not a straight line but a complex, unpredictable journey, and that our ancestors were far more sophisticated, ambitious, and spiritually profound than we ever dared to imagine. Of all the artifacts we've explored that challenge history, perhaps none tells a more revealing story about the challenger, about us, than the enigmatic crystal skulls. These hauntingly beautiful objects, carved from a single block of clear or milky quartz, have become iconic symbols of ancient mystery, featured in blockbuster films and cited as vessels of esoteric power. With their smooth, polished surfaces and empty, staring eyes, they seem to gaze out from the deep past, promising a connection to lost worlds and hidden knowledge. The most famous among them, like the Mitchell Hedges skull and the British Museum skull, were long believed to be masterworks of ancient Mesoamerican artistry, perhaps Aztec or Maya, created centuries ago for high priests to use in rituals to harness supernatural forces. Legends grew around them that they could reveal the future, heal the sick, or even kill on command if used with malevolent intent. Some stories, popularized by the New Age movement, claimed there were 13 original skulls that, when brought together, would unlock profound secrets about humanity's origins and destiny. This powerful narrative transformed them from mere artifacts into objects of modern mythology, embodying our deepest yearning for a past that was more magical, more connected to the cosmos than our own. Yet, the true story of the crystal skulls is not one of ancient priests, but of a much more recent and worldly craft, the art of the forgery. The romantic tale began to seriously unravel in the late 20th century, when these objects finally came under the rigorous scrutiny of modern science. Researchers employed tools unknown to the 19th century antiquities market, such as scanning electron microscopes. What they found was telling and ultimately damning. The surfaces of the skulls, under extreme magnification, showed the minute, parallel grooves of rotary wheels and other abrasive tools, the unmistakable fingerprints of modern industrial lapidary equipment. This technology simply did not exist in the pre-Columbian Americas. Ancient Mesoamerican artisans carved even their hardest stones like jadate using hand-powered tools, abrasives like sand and water, along with drills made of bone or wood. Their work would show irregular, multidirectional markings, not the perfectly even mechanical patterns left by a jeweler's wheel that began appearing in Europe in the 19th century. This forensic evidence pointed to a single, inescapable conclusion. The most famous crystal skulls were not ancient relics at all, but clever fakes, likely manufactured in workshops in Germany or France sometime between the 1860s and the 1880s. This period provides the crucial context for understanding why these forgeries were created and why they were so readily believed. The 19th century was a time of intense fascination with the exotic and the ancient. Major exhibitions showcased artifacts from Egypt and the Middle East, and museums across Europe and America were in a fierce competition to acquire the most spectacular pieces to attract the public. This created a booming market for antiquities, and where there is high demand and high prices, forgery inevitably follows. Skilled lapidaries in Idar-Oberstein, Germany, a major center for gem cutting, had the expertise and the equipment to create such objects. They were catering to a hungry market of wealthy collectors and institutions who were eager to own a piece of the mysterious past, often without the expertise to tell the real from the fake. The skulls were perfect for this purpose. They were visually striking. They tapped into the popular romantic image of the savage and mystical Americas, and there were very few genuine examples of Mesoamerican crystal carving to use for comparison. In essence, the crystal skulls are a product of their time, not of the ancient world, a testament to Victorian-era curiosity, colonialism, and commercial opportunism. The enduring lesson of the crystal skulls, therefore, is not about ancient magic, but about the modern magic of a compelling story. Their journey from 19th century workshop curios to 21st century cultural icons teaches us a crucial lesson in skepticism and the concept of provenance, the documented history of an object's origin and ownership. A lack of clear provenance is often the first and biggest red flag for any archaeological find. The most famous skulls appeared on the market with grand stories attached, discovered in a lost jungle temple by a daring adventurer, perhaps, but with no verifiable paperwork, no eyewitnesses to their excavation, and no connection to any documented archaeological site. This stands in stark contrast to genuine artifacts which are carefully recorded in situ, photographed alongside other objects, and their soil layers analyzed. The skull story also highlights a psychological truth. We are often far more willing to believe an exciting falsehood than a mundane truth. The idea of a lost civilization with advanced technology or spiritual wisdom is infinitely more captivating than the reality of a clever artisan in a European workshop carving a skull to make a living. This desire for wonder can cloud our judgment, making us partners in the deception, eager to suspend our disbelief. Ultimately, the crystal skulls remain powerful objects, but their power has shifted. They are no longer windows into an ancient world, but rather mirrors reflecting our own hopes, fantasies, and our sometimes willing gullibility. They stand as a permanent cautionary tale for archaeologists, collectors, and enthusiasts alike, reminding us to always ask for the evidence, to demand the provenance, and to question the story that seems too good to be true. Their greatest mystery is not where they came from, but why we wanted so desperately to believe in them. They teach us that the most seductive ruins are not always made of stone. Sometimes they are built from our own imagination. And the most important excavation we can undertake is not of the earth, but of the stories we tell ourselves about the past. Standing in a quiet park in Newport, Rhode Island, is a structure that seems both utterly ordinary and profoundly mysterious. The Newport Tower, a 28-foot-tall circular stone tower supported by 8 graceful arches, looks like a forgotten relic from a medieval European village, inexplicably dropped into the heart of a New England town. Its very presence in this location has been a riddle since the 1600s, making it one of America's most enduring and hotly debated historical puzzles. Unlike an artifact found out of place, the tower is permanently, visibly out of place, a stone question mark that has invited a century's worth of speculation, wild theories, and passionate debate about who built it and why. The tower's mystery is rooted in its ambiguous design. It doesn't neatly fit into any single architectural tradition. Its most prominent feature, the 8 arches, are Romanesque in style, reminiscent of structures from much older European context. This ancient feel is what first sparked the idea that it must predate Columbus. The most enduring and popular theory attributes it to the Vikings. Proponents of this idea, often pointing to the voyages of Leif Erikson around the year 1000, argue that the tower resembles known Norse structures like round churches found in Scandinavia. They see it as a possible baptistry, a watchtower, or even an astronomical observatory built by those intrepid explorers, a permanent stone marker of the first European presence on these shores centuries before other settlers arrived. This theory gained so much traction that a Norse coin, the Maine Penny we discussed earlier, was sometimes incorrectly cited as supporting evidence, even though the two finds are completely separate. But the Vikings are just the beginning of the speculative tapestry woven around this tower. Another captivating theory links it to the legendary Knights Templar, the powerful medieval crusading order that was suppressed in the early 14th century. According to this narrative, surviving Templars, possessing secret knowledge and vast wealth, fled Europe with their fleet, possibly carrying holy relics like the Ark of the Covenant or the Holy Grail. They supposedly crossed the Atlantic and established a new refuge in the New World, with the Newport Tower serving as a Templar chapel or a navigational aid. This theory connects to broader myths about Oak Island and its famous money pit, painting a picture of a vast, hidden pre-Columbian history that official academia refuses to acknowledge. The tower's circular design fuels this fire as it echoes the architecture of the Temple Church in London, a famous Templar site. These romantic and thrilling narratives, however, collide with a much more mundane and well-documented historical record. The first unambiguous written reference to the tower appears in the will of Benedict Arnold, the first colonial governor of Rhode Island and the great-grandfather of the infamous traitor. Dated 1677, his will bequeaths to his wife my stone-built windmill, which stands on his property. This seemingly simple phrase offers a powerful and straightforward explanation. The tower was a windmill built in the mid-17th century by early colonial settlers. Architectural historians support this, pointing to the existence of other stone tower mills in England from the same period, particularly in Arnold's native Dorset. The arches allowed for the turning of the mill sails, and the interior would have housed the grinding mechanism. From this perspective, the tower is not an ancient mystery at all, but a rare and impressive example of early American industrial architecture, a testament to the practical skills and ambitions of the first colonists. This clash of interpretations makes the Newport Tower a fascinating case study in how we use the past. It acts as a perfect cultural Rorschach test. What people see in its arches says more about their own desires and beliefs than about the tower's true origin. In the 19th century, during a period of massive Scandinavian immigration, the Viking theory provided a proud, noble European heritage for new Americans, a story that predated the Anglo-centric pilgrim narrative. The Templar theory, which gained popularity in the 20th century, taps into our enduring fascination with secret societies, lost treasures, and alternative histories that promise to reveal a world more magical and connected than the one we know. The tower becomes a blank canvas upon which we project our own cultural myths and longings for a more exciting past. Resolving this centuries-old debate requires moving beyond speculation and embracing a multidisciplinary approach. Modern science has stepped in to try and settle the argument. Radiocarbon dating of mortar samples from the tower has consistently returned dates centered firmly in the 17th century, perfectly aligning with Governor Arnold's lifetime and his written mention of a windmill. While some critics argue that the mortar could have been contaminated or repaired, the consistency of the results strongly supports the colonial origin. Furthermore, a meticulous archaeological study of the foundation found no evidence of any structure predating the colonial period. There are no Viking artifacts, no Templar relics, no mysterious inscriptions, only the remains of a prosperous colonial farm. The tower, therefore, stands not as proof of pre-Columbian contact, but as a monument to the complexity of historical inquiry itself. It teaches us that the truth is often found not in the most exciting story, but in the careful, patient work of correlating documents, archaeology, and architectural analysis. It reminds us that sometimes the most fascinating history is the real one, waiting to be understood not through fantasy, but through the diligent and often unglamorous pursuit of evidence. Yet the most profound and enduring impact of the Kensington Runestone lies not in the question of its authenticity, but in what its story reveals about us, the storytellers. It stands as a powerful case study in the potent and often perilous intersection of history and identity. In the late 19th century, Minnesota was a state filling with Scandinavian immigrants, people seeking a new life in America, but often facing prejudice and a struggle to find their place in a narrative dominated by English pilgrims and founding fathers. The discovery of the runestone offered a breathtaking new origin story. It wasn't just a rock, it was a birth certificate. It provided a proud pre-Columbian claim to the land, a validation of their heritage, and a dramatic entry for their ancestors into the grand saga of American history. The stone became a potent symbol of pride, a tangible link that connected these new Americans not to the margins of the national story, but to its very beginnings, transforming them from newcomers into rightful heirs. This powerful emotional investment created a fierce, often tribal, defense of the stone's legitimacy, where questioning its authenticity could feel like an attack on an entire community's value and belonging. This passionate defense highlights a crucial and often overlooked dimension of archaeology, the political weight that artifacts can carry. The Kensington Runestone is far from alone in this. Around the world, historical objects are frequently leveraged to support nationalistic narratives, to justify territorial claims, or to bolster the cultural prestige of a particular group. An artifact's symbolic power can become so immense that it overwhelms scientific discourse, making impartial analysis incredibly difficult. The debate ceases to be a calm academic discussion about linguistics and geology and transforms into a heated cultural battle, where evidence is viewed not objectively, but through the lens of what it means for a community's self-understanding. The stone exemplifies how the past is never truly past. It is a country we constantly revisit and reshape to meet the needs and desires of the present. We look into the well of history and often see our own reflection staring back at us, and the Kensington story is a perfect reflection of the immigrant experience, the search for roots, and the deep human need to feel that we have always belonged. Ultimately, the stone's legacy is a lesson in the delicate art of authentication and the humility required in the face of historical mystery. Proving something false is often just as difficult as proving something true, especially when an object has been removed from its original context. Without the archaeological crime scene, intact the exact soil layers, the associated artifacts, the precise conditions of its discovery, we are left with a puzzle missing most of its pieces. We must rely on a preponderance of evidence, on the consensus of experts from multiple fields, and on the principle of Occam's razor, that the simplest explanation, the one that requires the fewest assumptions, is usually the correct one. In this case, the simplest explanation is that a hard-working, proud Swedish immigrant, familiar with the runic alphabet from his own heritage and caught up in the popular fascination with Vikings, created an artifact that would bring honor to his community. This doesn't make the story of the Kensington Runestone any less meaningful. In fact, it makes it profoundly human. It may not be a 14th century treasure, but it is an undeniable 19th century treasure, a window into the hopes, dreams, and complex identity of the people who carved a life out of the Minnesota wilderness, and in doing so, carved their own unique mark onto the long and ever-evolving story of America. Buried within a carefully excavated tomb at the ancient Toltec site of Calixtlahuaca in Mexico, an artifact emerged that seemed to hold the features of a different world entirely. Discovered in 1933 by archaeologist José Garcia Payon, this was no typical Mesoamerican relic. It was a small, hand-modeled terracotta head, but its style was utterly alien to the pre-Columbian Americas. The figure wore a distinct hat known as a pileus, a style common among Roman sailors. His beard, his facial structure, and the very technique used to create him looked less like the work of a Toltec artisan and more like a piece of pottery that could have been unearthed in Italy or Greece. The head was found in a sealed archaeological layer beneath two undisturbed floors, in a burial that was carbon dated to between the 12th and 13th centuries, long before the Spanish conquest. This single, small object, now known as the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca Head, immediately launched one of the most tantalizing and fiercely contested debates in all of archaeology. Could it be genuine proof of transatlantic contact between the Roman Empire and the civilizations of ancient America? The implications of an affirmative answer are staggering. It would mean that the vast oceans separating the Old World from the New were not the absolute barriers we have always believed. It would suggest that a Roman vessel, perhaps blown wildly off course, might have somehow made the perilous journey across the Atlantic, bringing with it a sailor or artisan whose likeness was then captured in local clay. This theory, while radical, is not entirely out of the realm of nautical possibility. We know the Romans were exceptional seafarers in the Mediterranean, and we have historical accounts, like the vague description of a land across the ocean in the works of the Roman writer Seneca, that some have interpreted as prophetic or based on rumor. Finding a tangible Roman object in a pre-Columbian context would be the smoking gun that transforms these speculations into plausible history, forcing a complete rewrite of our understanding of ancient exploration and cultural exchange. It opens the door to a far more interconnected ancient world, where ideas, goods, and people might have moved along routes we are only just beginning to imagine. However, the world of archaeology operates on a foundation of rigorous evidence and healthy skepticism, and the head has faced intense scrutiny since the moment it was found. The primary and most persistent counter-argument is one of context and potential contamination. The site at Calixtlahuaca was not excavated with the meticulous, layer-by-layer techniques that are standard practice today. The possibility that the head was a later intrusion into the burial cannot be definitively ruled out. A colonial-era Spanish settlement existed nearby, and it is entirely plausible that a European object from the 16th or 17th century, perhaps a toy or a decorative piece lost by a settler, could have worked its way down into the older layers over centuries through animal burrowing, erosion, or even the excavation process itself. This would make the head a fascinating historical object in its own right, but not an ancient one. The other major suspicion is that it could be an outright forgery, planted either as a prank or to bring fame to the discovery site. The 1930s was a period rife with archaeological hoaxes, and without an unbroken and perfectly documented chain of custody, this shadow of doubt is difficult to completely dispel. The true power of the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca Head, therefore, lies not in providing a definitive answer, but in perfectly illustrating the immense challenges and complexities of interpreting the past. It serves as a masterclass in the concept of provenance, the detailed history of an object from the moment it is discovered. In a perfect scenario, an artifact is found in a pristine, sealed context, photographed in situ, and its surrounding soil carefully analyzed. This head story is messier, leaving just enough ambiguity to fuel endless debate. It forces archaeologists to be detectives, weighing every piece of evidence. Scientific analysis has provided some intriguing clues. Thermoluminescence dating, a technique used to determine the last time a piece of pottery was fired, has been performed on the head, with results indicating an age of around 1800 years old, which would place its creation squarely in the Roman era. Yet, even this scientific data is contested by critics who question the testing methods or suggest the sample could have been contaminated. Ultimately, this small terracotta head is a monument to a fundamental truth in archaeology. The past is not a simple, clean narrative. It is a complex puzzle where pieces can become dislodged, where layers can mix, and where our own desires to find connections can sometimes influence what we think we see. The head encourages a global perspective, challenging the isolationist view that cultures developed entirely independently. It reminds us that the human story is one of movement, curiosity, and unexpected encounters. Whether it is ultimately proven to be a Roman traveler, a colonial doodad, or a clever fake, its legacy is secure. It stands as a permanent question mark, a humble piece of fired clay that compels us to keep asking questions, to remain open to possibilities, and to always acknowledge that the story of humanity is far richer, more complex, and more wonderfully mysterious than we could ever have imagined. So as we reach the end of this incredible journey through 33 mysteries, what are we left with? It's not a simple answer or a neat conclusion, because these artifacts defy that very concept. Instead, we're left with a profound sense of perspective, a humbling recognition that the story of human history is not a straight, predictable line from primitive to advanced, but something far more fascinating. It's more like a sprawling, intricate web, full of unexpected connections, false starts, lost knowledge, and brilliant flashes of innovation that sometimes flickered out, only to be independently rediscovered centuries or even millennia later. These objects, whether ultimately explained by science or still shrouded in mystery, collectively challenge the arrogance of the present. They remind us that our current technological supremacy is not the inevitable peak of human achievement, but merely one chapter in a much longer, more complex saga. This perspective forces a crucial balance in how we approach these enigmas. On one hand, we must embrace the rigorous skepticism of the scientific method. The majority of these artifacts, from the Coso spark plug to the Ica Stones, teach us the invaluable lesson of context and the critical importance of provenance. They warn us of the human capacity for hoaxes, for misidentification, and for seeing patterns where none exist. This disciplined scrutiny is our essential filter, protecting us from building grand theories on the shaky foundation of wishful thinking. It is the necessary anchor that keeps curiosity from drifting into pure fantasy. Yet, on the other hand, to dismiss every anomaly outright is to risk intellectual stagnation. The Antikythera Mechanism and Göbekli Tepe stand as permanent testaments to the fact that the ancient world was capable of sophistication that we never dreamed possible. They are the exceptions that prove we still have much to learn, and that the past still holds surprises capable of fundamentally rewriting our textbooks. This is why the field of archaeology, and indeed any historical inquiry, is not a dusty, closed book but a vibrant, dynamic detective story. It is a continuous process of questioning, discovering, and re-evaluating. Each new technological advance, from ground-penetrating radar to DNA analysis, gives us a new set of tools to re-examine old evidence and ask new questions. The discovery of a single artifact in a carefully documented context can unravel decades of accepted theory. This isn't a weakness of history, it's its greatest strength. It means our understanding is alive, it grows, and it adapts. The past is not a static set of facts to be memorized, but an ongoing conversation between the present and the traces left behind. Ultimately, the greatest gift these 33 tools offer is not a definitive answer about aliens or lost civilizations, but a renewed sense of wonder and a call to intellectual humility. They encourage us to sit comfortably in the space of not knowing, to be energized by the questions themselves rather than frustrated by the lack of easy answers. They teach us to hold two ideas in our minds at once, a healthy skepticism that demands evidence and an open-minded wonder that allows for possibility. This balanced approach is what drives true discovery. It's what pushes us to keep digging, to keep analyzing, and to keep looking at the world and the past with fresh, curious eyes. The journey through these mysteries doesn't end here. It simply opens a door, inviting us all to become detectives in the greatest story ever told, the endlessly surprising, profoundly human story of our own past. And so our journey through these 33 enigmas draws to a close, but the conversation they spark is far from over. What unites these objects, from Chinese letter gears of the Antikythera Mechanism to the contested glyphs of Gosford, is not a single answer but a powerful, shared question. They represent the enduring, universal human drive to look at the world around us and ask, how did this come to be? Is the story we've been told the whole story? This quest for understanding is what pushes us to dig deeper, to look closer, and to never fully accept that the final chapter on our past has been written. These artifacts, in all their bewildering glory, are physical manifestations of that relentless curiosity. They are the tantalizing crumbs that suggest the path of human history is not a straight, well-lit highway, but a vast, dimly lit forest filled with forgotten trails and unexpected clearings. Some of these trails may lead to dead ends of hoaxes and misidentifications, while others might open onto vistas that completely reshape our understanding of the landscape. This is why a balanced approach is not just helpful but essential. On one hand, we must arm ourselves with the sharp tools of skepticism. The wild tales of the Dropa Stones and the proven forgery of the crystal skulls teach us the vital importance of evidence, provenance, and rigorous scientific scrutiny. They remind us that our desire for a more wondrous past can sometimes lead us astray, making us eager partners in a compelling deception. This critical lens protects us from building castles in the air, ensuring our theories are grounded in something more solid than wishful thinking. Yet, on the other hand, we must also protect our capacity for sheer, unbridled wonder. The undeniable sophistication of the Antikythera Mechanism and the world-altering age of Göbekli Tepe stand as permanent warnings against intellectual arrogance. They prove that the ancient world was capable of brilliance we are only just beginning to comprehend, and that dismissing every anomaly out of hand is a sure way to stagnate and miss the next great discovery. The truth often lies not in choosing one extreme over the other, but in holding both skepticism and wonder in a dynamic, productive tension. This ongoing exploration is what makes the study of history so profoundly exciting. It is not a dead field of memorizing settled facts, but a living, breathing detective story where new evidence can emerge at any moment. Every technological advance, from improved carbon dating to satellite imaging, gives us a new set of keys to unlock old mysteries. A forgotten manuscript might be rediscovered in a library archive. A new geological survey might reveal a hidden chamber, or a storm might erode a cliff face to expose a structure we never knew was there. The past is not a static monolith. It is a puzzle that is still being assembled, and we are incredibly fortunate to live in a time when we can watch new pieces click into place. Your engagement with this mystery is a part of that process. Your curiosity, your questions, and your own research contribute to a global conversation that keeps the story of humanity alive and evolving. Thank you for investing your time and your imagination in this exploration of history's greatest riddles. This channel is dedicated to diving deep into the shadows of the past and bringing these fascinating stories into the light. If this journey has sparked your own curiosity, please help us continue the search by liking this video and subscribing to the channel. But most importantly, we want to hear from you. The conversation continues down in the comments. Which of these 33 artifacts do you find the most compelling? Do you lean towards a skeptical explanation, or do you believe some of these objects are genuine proof of a forgotten chapter? And what other historical mysteries should we investigate next? Is there a lost city, an unexplained structure, or a bizarre artifact you want us to cover? Your input directly shapes our future content. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and never stop exploring the incredible, mysterious